Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's the brain of the mainframe, Nile Scala here, with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Billy Tucci, along with our good pal, guest co-host tonight, Mr. JC Vaughn. JC, how you doing? Billy, how you doing, my friends?
Excellent, Nile.
I'm doing pretty good. I had my first physical today in, I don't know, gee whiz, maybe 13 years or so, and it went great. Apparently, I'm a very healthy person. But I had to do blood work and all that, so we'll see when the blood work comes in. But apparently everything's good. I have a little bit of hearing loss at the highest pitch in my left ear. But, it's all that rock and roll, I think.
Did you do a lot of coughing? Did you have to do a lot of coughing?
No. Oh, so here's a funny story. So if I may, so Matthew says, my 13-year-old, I'm like, all right, Matthew, we're just talking. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the doctor. He's like, why? I said, I have to get a physical. And he goes, Dad, you know what they do when you get a physical, right? And I'm like, no. I'm like, what? He goes, they grab your penis. He's 13. I thought it was funny, but anyway, but they don't really do that anymore. So, but apparently not.
Maybe that was
you don't have a good enough doctor.
Everything's good.
You need to find a better doctor, Billy.
Yeah, I should.
Mine buys
a wonderful experience. So, no, it's all with the blood work now and the urine tests and all that jazz.
Yeah. It's a gargle test. So, Jeff.
We are certainly on topic.
Anyway, Jeff has some real news. Let's see what J.C. Vaughn, of the Vice President of Gemstone Publishing, he's got some news.
Free Comic Book Day this year. In my hands with Billy Tucci cover. Very excited about it. And as I was discussing with Nile before the show, Billy, that took me back to the very first cover I ever commissioned, which was Overstreet's Fan #3, the famous She variant cover that came out at San Diego. And I don't know if you remember this, but literally in 15 minutes, they were selling for $15 a pop at the show.
Oh, I know. Were they?
You remember? Yeah, they were absolutely crazy. And the cool thing is that among other things, aside from being the first cover I commissioned, it was colored by Mr. Brian Haberlin.
Yes.
And so I know that you, Billy, saw it, and I was talking to Nile about it, that Mr. Haberlin today reposted something from Mr. McFarlane, and we wanted to share that with the audience, and everybody was speculating about what this might be. It's the first time Todd's drawn Spidey professionally in 27 years. First time he's ever drawn him with Spawn, and thought maybe we would share on tonight's show what
is that for, pray tell.
Drum roll, maybe. Drum roll.
Boom. It's the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide number 50.
Number 50.
Yes, our 50th anniversary issue, man. 5 decades of Bob's book.
Wow.
And I'm really excited to have commissioned this. I'm very appreciative of Marvel for approving it. You know, they're quite understandably, because they're Marvel, they're a little bit tight on approving crossovers.
Yeah.
And so we feel particularly honored that they allowed us to do this. And of course, Todd spoke at Stan's memorial service too. So, I mean, it's not like that he's distant from them, but it's been a long time since he drew Spidey, and we're beyond excited.
20
and of course,
years.
And the amazing thing, he pointed out that he did the background first, but Brian colored that in like an hour.
Wow.
I can't believe it, because it just looks freaking great. But so anyhow, I appreciate you guys letting me lead off the show with that, because I'm that broke today, and it's out there on Todd's social media and Brian's. And the whole story about it will be in scoop.previewsworld.net.com tomorrow in our Scoop email newsletter.
Well, we're really all looking forward to our crowdfunding comics episode focused on 50 years of Overstreet.
Yeah, I can't wait to do that too. And the great thing about it is that if you have a job that you really love, you got a lot more energy for it. And I run a book I grew up reading, for Pete's sake. I mean, you have to. It's some days when things are bad, you just got to stop and go, who gets to do this?
Yeah.
And I get to work with, quite obviously, the best artists in the business, even including Billy.
Oh,
Hey, not bad. He's really coming together. You know?
Oh my gosh! In all seriousness, as much as everybody knows Billy for She and Zombie Sama and his other projects, his tick cover, man, it still blows me away.
Oh yeah. Well, the source material, you can't beat it. You know.
Thank you, TJ. And I don't think so, but thank you.
Yes, every tick piece has to have a little bit of Ben Endlet in it. And then you try to add your own thing, but it was an honor. It was a privilege to work on that.
This is what the greatest thing about collaborating. When you call me and you say, "Yeah, I think I want to do Norman Rockwell for the Tick," I'm like,
yeah.
You know, you have to have a certain mindset to respond to that, which I did, which was okay.
No, it worked out terrific. People really love that one.
It really is an outstanding piece, and of course your she cover. After that was just awesome too, and I was so pleased to do that leading up to your big anniversary.
No, thank you. Well, speaking of the best in the business,
definitely,
no kidding,
and Old Bean, without further ado, can we bring in two of our guests? One, of course, is one of the most affable and capable and fan-friendly Comic-Con promoters and owners. Our friend, the great Mitch Hallock of the TERRIFICON, which is at Mohegan Sun this August. There he is. Hello.
Hey.
Good to see you, Mitch. How are you, my friend?
I am feeling very fine. I'm glad to hear you're well with your physical.
Well, knock on wood, right? Everything looks good on the surface, so hopefully.
Because I think, if I recall, either I'm 2 months older than you or it's something like that. 1966.
Yeah, I'm August.
I'm July 10th.
Yeah, I'm August 13th, so I'm a month and 3 days younger than you.
Yeah. So see, this is what happens in that month. You just
So stop bullying me and pushing me around at conventions.
Exactly.
So, but Mitch, if we may, I mean, we've got one of the three of, and I'm sure you as well, one of our favorite comic creators ever. You know, I mean, up there in the top echelon. Would you mind? Would you do the honors of introducing our very special guest, Mitch, tonight?
Oh, sure. And it's not Jerry Tucci.
No.
But we're close. We're halfway there. Well, what can I say about the next guest here? He's a writer. He's an artist. Fans like myself have been following his work all the way back until All-Star Squad, and he'll tell you about Thunder Bunny and even all the other little things he used to work on too before he became the legend that we know as Mr. Jerry Ordway of Superman and Shazam fame. There he is, right there, smiling. And that's President of the United States.
Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, so we're pretty pumped, man. We were talking about this for a while, especially because I listen to the Power Cosmic podcast.
Oh, you're the one.
That's me. You're only listener. And getting you guys on was great. When I told them, like, yeah, we got to do it. We got to get them on. So thank you again, Mitch and Jerry, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This is such a pleasure and a privilege.
We usually do this for pizza, though.
Yeah, you didn't get the bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see if my mom can order us pizza since I'm in my basement.
Yeah, your mom.
Hey, Mom! No.
Mom, the meatloaf.
Mom! So, and then we got on here, if you guys, Overstreet Price Guide, we've got JC Vaughn in the house. And JC is he is truly, I'm the brain of the mainframe when it comes to the construction and the handling of this show, in the programming. But I mean, JC is the brain. He's the man full of all the knowledge.
I being bald doesn't make me the brain.
I know. I'm trying to do what you did. I think if I keep losing it, I'll be smart too.
Ah, well, in that case, carry on.
You're mislabeled. You should be. I think Nile. You should be the notorious Nile Scala.
Oh,
we've got the labels wrong here.
No. Speaking of labels, I noticed I typed the word GamerCon wrong. Where's the proofreader on this stuff? I'm just looking at it now going, what does that say?
Yeah, what is that?
GameTricon.
There's a T in there that shouldn't be. Yeah, you got to watch the way they spell it.
It's just a take on Contra.
Remember.
GameTron is game.
Badass. Don't drink and type.
That does sound like a robot or something.
You know what it was? 2 seconds before we got on, I was like, oh, geez, I got to do this. All right, that's what happens when you rush.
Got to finish my beer.
Exactly. Never rush, kids. Never rush. But
So, Mitch, speaking of Connecticut GamerCon, I mean, tell us a little bit about that because that's coming up next month.
well, GamerCon is coming up at the Mohegan Sun. This will be the fourth time we've done this one, and it's like Terrificon, except there's no comic books, but there's video games and Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and it started because of Terrificon, because I had an empty couple panel rooms upstairs, and I said, what can we do with this room? Because when you're renting out the hall, you want to get your money's worth. He's like, I'm paying for all this stuff, so let's use every square inch of it. So, I have two sons. They were teenagers at the time, and they like video games. So I said, let's put some video game stuff up there. And let me tell you, the line was out the door all weekend. I was like, and where were my two sons? I was like, they're supposed to be helping out with the show. I go up there, they're playing the Smash Brothers, the Guitar Hero. The kids are crazy for it. So I said, hey, I wonder if they do video game conventions. So then we started doing that. 8,000 people showed up the first year. I was like, whoa, I guess there is something with this thing,
Wait, you had 8,000 people for your first gaming comic? Now, did you know how to put on a gaming convention? Like, how does one learn how to do that if you've never done that before?
My gaming technology left with Space Invaders and Pac-Man back in the what was that, like early 80s or something? Yeah, and Atari. Remember that? That's about it.
Sure.
Pong. Yeah.
Pong.
And
Pong is like 74.
You have kids and they keep you young. So I'd come home and they're on the Call of Duty and they got the headsets on and they're screaming at each other and they're up to 4 or 5 in the morning. And I'm like, what the hell? Get a job. Stop doing this,
Yeah.
So I talk, and no offense to you, Billy and Jerry, but I asked my kids, I go, hey, look, I got these great comic book creators of the show. They're like, yeah. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because they don't read comics.
Yeah.
What a shock. I got 40,000 comics over here, and the kids don't want anything to do with them. But they want video games.
Yeah.
So they were actually the consultants on this whole thing. I'd sit there and go, okay, you tell me what games are good, what games are bad. Is Donkey Kong still a thing? They're like, what? No. So, I got a quick learning curve there, and the boys taught me all about the world of online games. And then there's the Magic the Gathering. I remember Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s. That was just starting back then, and now it's expanded and there's all types of games and stuff. And there's so many people. Let me tell you, how we're passionate about comic books?
Yeah.
The gamer community is just as passionate about their stuff they want. They know everything. And just like we have Marvel and DC, and then we have our subcategories of Fantastic Four and Justice League, same type of mentality. They get into it. They know the minutia. They know the players. They know who wrote the guidebooks, who did the artwork for it. So it's almost like running another comic book show. And to answer your first question, was I thinking 8,000 people? No, I thought if 2,000 showed up, I'd be happy. I would break even. Everybody would be happy. We'll go home. Nice, quiet weekend. I never expected 8,000 people to show up, So
that's incredible. So when's the date? What's the dates of the show?
This year we're March 21st and 22nd. I always do it in March because being up here in New England, people get cooped up.
Yeah.
You've been stuck inside for 3 or 4 months with the cold weather. You just want to get out. So we're almost like, the Robin of spring to tell people it's con season. It's starting to get out there, and that's what happens. So it'll be March 21st and 22nd at the Mohegan Sun Convention Center, the smaller one that we used to do Terrificon in until we got so big we had to move to the other side of the complex and go into the Expo Center. And that's it. That's everything you want to know about video game conventions.
Yeah. Well, what are you estimating for this year?
Based on ticket sales, I'm going to say it's going to be at least 8,000 again, knock on wood or whatever. And there's no snow. I mean, we've had a mild winter, so that's always helpful.
We've had like 2 snowfalls here. It's incredible.
Yeah, because you never know. Yeah.
Now, speaking of video games, as the world's oldest teenager, the comic books industry's version of Dick Clark, Mr. Jerry Ordway. What's your favorite video games? Do you play video games?
No. I played, I played when my kids were smaller. We played like Smash Brothers, and I like the driving games. I like Mario Kart because it was just, I just enjoyed racing, that aspect of it. I'm not good with the multiple buttons. You know, the kids are doing all the combinations and stuff, and we started playing Smash Brothers when we got I think it was I forget what more recent Nintendo system, and they just totally destroyed me. So I felt like I was, being a good parent. I was like, my kids beat me up.
And they embarrass you and stuff, right? And call you a boomer.
I'd last like 3 seconds, and they'd be, there he is, he's dead.
So let me ask you guys to get on another topic now with the podcast, the Power Cosmic podcast. How did Mitch? How did you and Jerry come together on this? Now doing the podcast.
Well, the funnier thing is, it's just an extension of the typical BS sessions we normally have. We'll go out for pizza, and then I review movies here on the local radio station here, WPLR in Connecticut, the morning show, where I'm the king of the nerds. And usually I would drag Jerry along to go see the movies because my wife doesn't want to go see superhero movies. She's not into that. If it's a Hallmark movie, she'll go, but she doesn't want to watch those. And so Jerry, myself, my late friend Dan, we'd all go to the movies, and we'd be those guys in the Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever it was, science fiction, superheroes. The big fanboys in the corner that are sitting there complaining about the lighting wasn't right or some nerdy thing,
And shushing the kids.
Yeah. And
you guys are being shushed.
Yeah. No, so I would do that, and then I had this podcast where I interview people like Paul Kupperberg. He always gets mad I say his name wrong.
Yeah.
And so I've done podcasting since 2007. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like one of the first folks to start getting into this stuff. So it's like, let's do a show about comic books and movies and TV and toys and video games, whatever you want to talk about, just like what you're doing here now.
Yeah.
So I literally, one day Jerry and I are out, and I said, let's turn the phone on. So here's how high tech we are. I just take my Apple iPhone and I hit record, and I slap it on the table at the pizza restaurant, and we just start, whatever the latest thing is, whether who's making DC comic news or the latest Marvel movie. And it's just usually a half hour to an hour of us commenting on the world as it is. And believe it or not, people tune in and listen to it, which is amazing to me, Mm-hmm. So Jerry's the quiet one on the show.
On this show?
No, on our show, the Power Cosmic. I'm over there. I'm the Billy Tucci of our show.
I know, and we had a discussion today, and I apologize to Nile and Jeff, so I'm going to try to rear back because I just keep talking, and I have to stop.
I know, but I'm screaming. I go, come on, Jerry, say something. He goes, I will if you shut up. So, that's how it works.
Well, gentlemen, if I made a lot of big news in the industry this week, real busy news week, specifically with the departure of Dan DiDio over at DC Comics. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Yeah.
The main one is really that, Dan's been in the job such a long time that he's got supporters, he's got enemies. I mean, he's been there since almost 20 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And Mitch and I had talked about it on a podcast back in December. Yeah. I don't know if he edited it out or not.
No, it's in there. Yeah.
I said, it wouldn't surprise me, again, Dan has had multiple opportunities to do things, and he's created, helped create a bunch of different storylines, but they're constantly kind of trying to reinvent to boost sales, and it's a tough job.
Yeah.
So I think he just is basically was at the end of whatever, string he was on. They need to get new blood, I mean, not like the old days that were Julie Schwartz. I mean, Julie Schwartz is a good example of an editor who was around a long time, but he moved on to different characters. So he had, Superman as really his last thing, but he had done The Flash. He had done other characters. I think comics kind of need new blood in the same way that, most, like Billy and myself, we've been around a long time. You feel like the young kids are coming up and you're always looking over your shoulder. And that's kind of what comics has always have been. It's always about young people bringing new energy and different ideas. So I do think, if they get, anything to be said about Dan is that he was one of many people who've had that position, and he did his positive things. He did things that people didn't like, but, someone else gets a chance to do something new,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of describing it. I think that Dan had things that he put into effect and talent that he recruited that were very effective. and I think that he had some things that didn't go so well. Which makes him squarely human in that regard. The thing that I know is he loves comics.
Yeah.
He was willing to personally take a chance and write Metal Men, which I think he deserves some thanks for. And I think that in addition to getting me my only DC story that I ever did, Billy, wasn't he responsible for your Sergeant Rock?
Yes, he was. He absolutely was.
So then to me, he's all in the plus book right there.
He was up there now, and a few things with you, Jeff. And I know personal problems, but man, you really should have followed up on that and stayed on their radar.
Yeah, I look back at that, and I know exactly what happened, which was it was when the economy went south. We had our layoffs at work. My dad died, and I lost like 23% of my income, my freelance writing. And so sitting around coming up with stories that I didn't know would sell wasn't exactly the priority. Oh, yeah, and that was like right after I moved to New York. Genius move, right?
Yeah.
So
well, and Jerry, I'm sure, do you ever fall into that? Because I think, Jeff, the same way with you is that I feel the same. I mean, you have to hustle.
Yep.
And it's kind of tough because you don't want to. You feel like you're bothering people, but then you might achieve a certain form of level of success or something, or say you write a story, it does really well, or a series, and they're like, well, they should call me,
right?
Oh, right, yeah. Jerry? I mean, but they're so busy, and they've got hundreds of us, or 100 of us or so doing the same, that are always on their radar, that are constantly there. And
well, it's just, as we used to say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yep.
I never wanted to be a squeaky wheel. So I would talk them to a certain point, but then I'd say, look, if they're not going to respond after multiple phone calls or emails, they clearly don't care, So it's almost like I equate it with dating. You would try to go for that one girl who was kind of maybe a little bit beyond your reach, and you kept trying, and kept getting turned down. Well, at a certain point you go, I need to move on,
Yeah.
Is that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah. Otherwise, the court orders are coming into play.
Yeah. Well, and personally, I'd like to say, and if I may use a platform, because I haven't been on the show since Dan left, and is that I really owe all my DC work to him. I mean, I had pitched him as coming from a guy known for drawing women, and I my only other mainstream work, I just came off the Heroes for Hire, which was
Marvel.
Mostly, Black Cat, Misty Knight, and Colleen Wing. That's really what it was. And that I told Jimmy the story I had about World War II, Jimmy Palmiotti. And he was like, you got to pitch that to Dan with Sergeant Rock, because I wanted it to be a Sergeant Rock. And Dan was like, yeah, you really think? And Jimmy's like, yeah, listen to him. So, I said, Dan, I'll take you to lunch. So I met him in New York, and we went to that burger place that everybody goes to. Jerry,
that place.
Yeah, no, that place. There's a bar. It's a burger bar place that everyone always seems to go
in New York. Really,
I haven't been.
All the DC guys always went. Whatever. And I basically told him the story, and I said, I know you have doubts with me, and I had some art with me, and I told him the story of the Japanese Americans, the 442, and I told him the story of the, basically the Lost Battalion, a 1-page pitch, and next thing I know, he's wiping his eyes, and he's like, I got lunch. And he said, let's do it. And right there, he brought me to Mike Martz. He said, Mike, you want to edit Billy? Because I've known Mike for a long time. And Mike said, sure. And that's how it started. So I really owe all my DC work really to him.
So putting cayenne pepper on those pages that you handed him really worked out well, I guess.
Yeah. Spike the mayonnaise.
Yeah, you go. So
yeah, and I think going back to what Jerry said, I think it's a very even-handed analysis, and you suspect that Dan's skills with team building and laying out some sort of vision, he'll land something else, and I will be very interested to see what it will be.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, do you guys have any predictions or thought though on where DC is going to head to though with their structure?
I feel like the main thing I've noticed is from the time AT&T put in an offer to take over, buy Warner Brothers, there's been a lot of weird stuff going on. I mean, that's the beginning of the Zack Snyder Justice League imploding, and there were a lot of elements that were happening because I follow media news. I'm a big movie buff, a lot of stuff started happening that felt like it wasn't related to creative. It was related to streamlining the company in some way to make it look better as a purchase. And from that point on, they spent over a year waiting for government approval for that as a merger or takeover.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And DC launched their their DC online site. They've done things that seem like they had different plans than what are going to happen now. So I think the business in total, I mean, DC right now, AT&T doesn't seem to be a company that cares about movies as much as they care about IP. So we like comics. We like characters. We don't like, if you like Superman, we're not thinking of Superman as intellectual property. We're thinking about, characters and stories and things that we read and loved. So I think there's a disconnect maybe. And I don't know because I'm not inside the company, but it feels like a lot of what has happened with Warner is also tied to, in some way, a perception that AT&T, the new, bosses, might have as just an income stream and how to maximize it or how to, best use it, and how will that work into HBO Max? Because HBO Max is like their end game. That's their end game from the start. They wanted to launch their own version of Netflix. So I think DC's kind of caught, and hopefully whoever gets to run DC is a comic fan and has some, publishing experience and not just a lawyer who knows, how to maximize.
Yeah, I have to say that in terms of shepherding the operation as an entirety, I hope that they avail themselves of both new blood and some of their elder statesmen who they have not utilized to their full.
Well, a guy who would be, off the top of my head, there's a guy who's been working there is Hank Canals. He's been working through multiple versions. Actually different divisions of Warner Brothers starting in maybe around 2000, 2002. He worked for theme parks. He's a big comic fan. I've known Hank since he was a kid. But he's worked his way up. But he's kind of like a Paul Levitz to me. He'd be like a really good business guy, but he also respects the creative aspect.
Yeah.
Former Ultraverse guy.
Yeah, but I don't even know if that's somebody that is on their radar. Maybe Jim Lee is the sole publisher, and maybe the editorial.
That's what I was wondering.
Maybe the editorial people take on the more creative aspects of putting together deals and things. Because Dan DiDio was kind of like the Hollywood studio head in a way. When he came in and took over as kind of the head of DC or whatever, that was when they changed the way you'd go in to pitch a story. You call up your editor and say, "Hey, I'd like to do. Is there anybody doing Green Lantern? Or is there, I have an idea for a Green Lantern story." And it became having to go in to meet Dan and try to pitch like a 2-sentence idea. And a lot of the comics that came out of that, when you read them, you go, "Wow, that you could tell this one wasn't successful, but it was probably a good pitch." You know what I mean? Because it has a hook, but maybe the follow through isn't good. It was a different way of doing business for me. And I think I always had a hard time with it because I just never could just pitch a 2-line thing. I always had to think something through. I wouldn't want to pitch something that I didn't know how it was going to end. So I'd eventually do a lot of work on something that someone would just say, "Nah." And then you've wasted, I guess, time doing a specific Batman type story or something. I've got tons of things on my hard drive that I pitched throughout the, from like 2007 on. I pitched projects that, I thought would be fun, and none of them landed,
Yeah. Brian Blevins says in the chat, on top of DC constantly reinventing themselves, they also never use the properties they had. Why create new characters when you have others incomplete?
Well, because new characters are going to be tied to whatever's going on. It's like, disco was a hot thing in the 70s. So you got, the Dazzler. There's still an aspect of comics being public or being pop culture. You have to be kind of with whatever the trend is. And sometimes old characters can be reinvented or repurposed in that way, and that's good.
But I remember you and I were talking on the show a while ago, and I said DC's problem since almost the late 90s, it's almost like the scab that you keep picking at that it never heals just before. Oh, look, it's almost there. I scratched it off and it's opened up again. And now you got to wait till it heals up. And oh, it's almost there. And then you scratch off the scab and it goes. It's like, why can't you just let it alone for a while, build up some continuity, get some fan base going, and without just pulling the rug out from everyone's feet? Because they lost me as a regular reader probably 20 years ago now, because that's what happened. I couldn't keep track of what universe was going on now, what happened to the ones I grew up with, because they're gone, and now you got a new group. So okay, fine, I'll stick with this for a while. So then I get my sea legs, I know what's happening, and then boom, there goes the rug again. And now we're gonna do everything, and everything you just learned is out the window. So don't even bother.
That's absolutely right. I think Brian asked a really good question. I think the answer is a little more complex. I think that simultaneously, you not only have to use the old characters, you have to create new characters, or it is just stagnant. Especially in an era where, rightly or wrongly, there are 47 Batman titles, there are 47 Wolverine titles, and rather than 2 or 3 incredibly good ones, which means you're turning down creators that have decent Batman and Wolverine stories, and picking only the ones that are superb. But we there's an old math that goes back to pre-1968 Marvel had 8 titles. 1991-92 Valiant, 8 titles. And everybody that wanted to could collect all of them. And they were all great. And yet sometimes when you get, and I'm picking on Wolverine, and it's one of my favorite characters, so just to be clear, but when you've got 47 Wolverine titles, you kill the thing that made Marvel great, which is continuity. It makes it impossible to have that.
But every big title, I mean, anytime a character like breaks big, like they did with Punisher back in the 80s, they want to exploit it.
Warzone,
oversaturate it.
Lobo was like that at DC, and
absolutely, Lobo Daycare was a big one.
They kind of. But I think the biggest issue Mitch and we talked about too is the double publishing, like publishing a book twice a month, is really unfair to an artist. Because there's no way an artist can draw 2 books a month. And the stuff that I really loved as a reader was always a consistent writer artist coming up with like a good run of a year or 2 years, whatever, on a book. That can't happen. Even if you have a good writer, you have inconsistent visuals. Even if they're good, it doesn't have an identity.
Even if you have a hot inker who is fast and can ink both of those artists, look a similar look. You lose that. But the other thing. Here's
the thing, though, and I see this from experience. A single artist, like in the days when we did Superman, or I did Shazam, or even All-Star Squadron. If you did a character for a certain amount of time, you actually owned that character. You could do. It wasn't like you made major changes, but the incremental changes belonged to you. So if you took them through any kind of whatever journey, you were the visual. And I mean, again, as an artist, I never just drew a script. I mean, I always contributed. I worked Marvel style a lot with Roy Thomas, with Marv Wolfman, with Byrne. I mean, that allows you to craft a story. It allows you to put like little stupid bits in stories from your childhood or from whatever. That adds personality. And I think that's what makes those runs of books memorable, is because Martian Manhunter suddenly likes Oreos, or I mean, it adds a character bit that's always remembered by the fans.
It's funny, but you're exactly right. Whether it is the Justice League International era, Guy Gardner getting knocked out by One Punch, or later on, Bo Smith's tough Guy Gardner, or Frank Miller and Klaus Jansson's Daredevil, or Walter Simonson's Thor, or Jerry Ordway's Captain Marvel. Everybody had their own take on it. And in many of these cases, we weren't talking about beginning with a number one. This is weird for the Overstreet guy to be saying, but our obsession with number one to jumpstart sales, rather than, if I say Thor 337, everybody knows it's the first Simonson. Daredevil 158, everybody knows first Frank Miller. You can name the Steranko issues of Captain America. You can say where Gil Kane came on a particular book, or John Romita Sr., or John Romita Jr., or Paul Smith, or any number of guys, Jim Lee. And it didn't have to be a new number one. And I think our obsession with that in the end is detrimental.
Yeah.
Do you think something that might alleviate that problem and something that could bring in new readers is perhaps, say, for one whole year, say a company like DC, and they would just concentrate on one and done stories, like the old
like when Jim Shooter,
and then you can, and Jerry, right? I mean, then maybe I think the readers would be a little more accepting of a different artist doing a book every other month.
Well, even if you did like a 2 or 3 part story, as long as you had a consistent,
Jerry,
it has to fit. Like what you're saying, though, the thing it has to fit into the framework and into the continuity in a way that is not inconsistent with the stuff that came before it and the stuff that came after it. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't set things too much. That's the biggest thing that they've lost. And that was one thing that I don't know if I would say Dan DiDio is to blame for, or it's to his credit, but he started, there was a period of time in the early 2000s where they started like grabbing writers who had some TV credit. And initially it's like, oh, look, it's the guy Back to the Future, or whatever. But then it became somebody who just had a TV credit or two, and we're going to seek them out and put them on books. And that in itself isn't wrong. And I think, there's nothing wrong with that. They got some good writers, but they basically allowed those people not to have to read back issues.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
if
I think
comic writer, your comic writer, like I remember talking to Claremont years ago, back in the 80s even, and he'd say comic writer was kind of like dependent on his comic collection, because if someone gave him Iron Man to write, he would feel duty bound to sit down and read every Iron Man story before he started, just to get a sense of it and a sense of what's been done. And that's kind of how it was always done. You're not going to give that same, you're not going to say that maybe Kevin Smith might have all those comics and he would read them, but maybe somebody else wouldn't. And it's like, oh, that's okay. Just do your own thing. That just leads to kind of a fragmented.
But that's what's going on right now. They're currently hiring TV writers.
Yeah.
They're doing that now, and they're actually, and that's what they're saying is what, they're looking at this, restructuring, and they're thinking because of the popularity that, the CW shows have, they're actually trying to pull those writers into the comics.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? I go to the comic shop every Wednesday because I get there when the door opens, and I see who comes running in. I see the speculators that I've never seen before run in and buy whatever hot book. Yesterday it was the Year of the Villain issue 3 because it was the first appearance of the Joker's new punchline.
At the end of the day, and they never have any of those.
I was there at 12 o'clock, an hour after they opened, and they were sold out. And I'm like, I don't care. And the guy who runs the show apologized. He's like, hey, I'm sorry, we're out of the books. I said, what happened? He's like, oh, the Joker's new girl. I said, I could care less. I don't care. Just give me a story I want. But one of the things I've noticed is they've been reprinting all these classic books, and they'll sell them for $1 each, or they'll have a facsimile.
The facsimile editions, yeah.
And what's so funny? I tend to buy those more often than a lot of the newer books. And I know this came up with Dan DiDio, and I'm a huge fan of omnibuses. Like right across from me, there's these massive phone book size hardcovers, and Jerry knows that too. He'll say, hey, you want this? I'm like, yeah, I'll take this 20-pound book and go home with it, because that couldn't happen nowadays, because the way the stories are told and the way they just like stop, start. There's no omnibus. It would be like, about that thin, because there's no years of continuity. I can go over to the Spider-Man Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and there's like 4 or 5 years worth of stories in that one book. And like you said, Billy, what if for 1 year they just pick Superman? I don't know, make like the Marvel had the Ultimate Universe, or do an offshoot of it where you just take the characters and say, okay, these are going to be away from the normal stuff or whatever. We're just going to go tell some old-fashioned Kurt Swan, Al Plastino type stories, or Denny and Neil Adams type, and that's it. Remember they had that book, what was it, the Tales of the Dark Knight, where it was standalone? Yeah. Oh, it was great because you'd have 1 or 2 issue stories.
Yeah, they were actually mainly more than that. They were mainly in the 3, 4, 5 range, but there were several 2-parters. But they were finite.
Yeah, but it never affected the real continuity of the Batman Detective Comic story. But they were great for a first time reader. Like if somebody just saw a Batman movie and you wanted to read more Batman stories, I would give them a collection of those books. I say, here, read this, and this is Batman. If you want to get into the whole history of Batman, you could do that. But right now, like you said, there's no history of any of these characters because you can't have a history if you only go 3 or 4 years and then you cancel the book and start new again.
All right, I got 2 things. One, if we're gonna look at Dan in the light of that, I also say that Dan also greenlit and supported the only one and done story that either of the big 2 were publishing in the last 10 years, and that was Jonah Hex.
Yeah, that was very
Jimmy and Justin were right.
Jimmy, Justin Gray, and Jimmy Palmiotti. Yeah. Oh, those are over there too on the shelf right now. I have them collected.
That was just awesome, and I really wish more people learned the lesson of that with, say, some superhero stuff. Okay, this actually brings a question that wanted to ask Jerry about this. When you are filtering a bunch of older influences into modern stories, trying to fit into what was the then modern continuity,
right?
Was that challenging on Power of Shazam, or was that a joy? Were you a huge fan of the character before that? How did that all come about?
It was actually kind of funny because the character, I always liked the costume. I really didn't know much about him because I think just my age, I was a Marvel maniac. So I knew the Marvel Captain Marvel. I knew all that. And I think DC started reprinting the Treasury size, and then they did like the Shazam stories that C.C. Beck was brought back for in
the 70s,
71 or 2.
Yeah.
Or right. So that was all I knew about it. I never really knew much beyond that. And I got interested through the editor, Jonathan Peterson, with the Shazam Captain Marvel serial, which is a totally different take.
Yeah.
And this is like a guy who, I mean, he and I watched it.
He grabs
he grabs a
machine gun.
He has a machine gun and mows people down. Yeah.
Right. He was definitely like a 1980s dark hero, if you wanted to do it that way. So when we did the graphic novel, there was the chance to do an origin, and it was a chance to do something where with Superman, I was part of a team, and I was kind of like point man on the stories, but I was still working on like one book of say 3 and later 4.
Yeah.
So this was something I could do on my own. I got to tell the origin, and we tried to tell it as if it were an adaptation of a movie because we had previously worked on the Batman 1989 movie comic. So that was the format was to try to do it that way. I insisted on coloring it because I wanted it to look kind of Indiana Jones, very warm, very, just that the color palette and stuff. And at the time, I was only going to do that one thing. And then they kept saying, at the time, Dick Giordano was like, well, we really want to spin out a monthly series. So I agreed to do it and basically tried to take elements but reintroduce them. So rather than, like here's what everybody has already seen, I could come to that same point where the basic pieces of the Shazam property were the way people remembered them, but I would introduce them myself. And I talk about filtering. At the time, I wanted to try to evoke the Spider-Man stuff that I was reading when I was a kid, which was the John Romita era, like Spider-Man from 50 on. That's when I first Spider-Man comic. So I wanted to kind of capture that feeling as a way to update Captain Marvel. I didn't want to update him to the 90s because he would be carrying guns. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was my way of doing it. And I had fun. I mean, it was really very gratifying. I had a good editor at that point, Mike Carlin. And Mike was a great cheerleader for the book, which an editor should be.
Yeah.
And, any creator who has like a long-term work relationship with any editor, the best ones are the ones who they don't have to be your best friend, but they have to be good cheerleaders. They have to be supportive and they have to, interact with you. So if you send them something, you don't just go, hey, I need 10 more pages.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you said about this that really resonates with me was I was a Marvel kid too, and I didn't care for this Captain Marvel. I'm like, why is he Captain Marvel?
Right.
And of course I learned over the years and had grudgingly acknowledged, okay, he was first, got it. But then when I went to work with Bob Overstreet, the CC Beck's cover for Overstreet 15, which was Shazaam, hung over the photocopier, which I would use every day. And I went from like whatever to just falling in love with it.
Right.
And then when the Power Shazaam graphic novel and your coloring on that had a lot to do with how I already liked your work, but how seriously I fell in love with that. The tone, that it wasn't what I perceived as goofy about the Golden Age stuff, but it wasn't it wasn't the cynical 90s,
right?
And so the only Golden Age books in my collection are original Captain Marvel now, all because of that cover and you.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's good. I mean, the one thing that was at the time I remember doing it, I was really nervous about taking on Captain Marvel because at the time when I first started, I forget when CC Beck passed away, but he was like a real outspoken guy and he hated anything and everything that came out new. So I used to actually think to myself, who would want to work with that guy as your critic, because you could never really do anything. So not that I remember by the time I was doing it, he had passed away, but I actually went to Don and Maggie Thompson were big Captain Marvel fans.
Sure.
And I specifically wanted to show them pages that I had done. And I was at a Philadelphia con. It was at maybe 90, I want to say 92 or 3 Philadelphia. It was like a one-time Philly show.
It was 93 because I was there.
And
it might have been 93. I was at that
Fred
show.
Fred Greenberg?
Yeah, it was that. And so I was at that show and I showed my pages and they were very, positive, which helped me. It bolstered that I felt like I was on the right track. The other thing that happened at that show, which is kind of funny, is Alex Ross came up to me and he said, so I understand you're the guy I have to talk to get a Captain Marvel project going. And I'm like, hey, I'm just a freelancer. I'm not an editor, And I said, I'm working on this thing and I still have, pages to do. So obviously DC's backing me. They're not going to suddenly go after, them waiting on these pages, which are coming slowly. They're not going to suddenly go, you're out. And Alex wasn't like, he was just.
Yeah, he wasn't quite Alex Ross yet. He was on the verge of it.
Getting noticed for Marvels. I think Marvels was just starting to get promoted. I don't even think it was.
It hadn't come out yet. If you're talking 93, right?
So that was just like a funny, encounter that kind of set a tone in a way because Alex was, I think, always wanted to do his own thing, and he's always been kind of foiled by DC. And at one point, when I worked with him on JSA, where he was doing the covers, when Jeff Johns was writing the JSA, I was like the full-time backup guy. But he and I had a couple conversations, and he said, "Yeah, I tried to pitch this Shazaam thing, and they just won't do it." And I realized at that point is the same thing that happened to me: is you fall in love with the characters, and all it does is break your heart.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That's what like with Alex. I knew that it was breaking his heart. I mean, I really could feel it, and I went through that exact thing. It's like you don't really own these characters; you have no control over them. So basically, it's almost like you raise these kids that you adopted, and then somebody else takes them and does what they want with them. And
I totally get that. I have the same problem with She.
Well, once Jerry Tucci took it over, that book just
exactly.
Yeah, it was all downhill from there.
All downhill.
Yeah.
It's
the only one that's worth reading.
So, speaking of like the characters you like, and that you learn to like Shazaam and Captain Marvel and the incredible work you did with that. What about characters you don't like? Like, what's your beef with Superman? What? No,
yeah,
seriously. No. How
Why did you kill him? Why did you kill him?
It's such an iconic it's one of the real watershed moments in comics.
Yeah.
It's Superman 123, right? Number 123 with the death of Superman, right?
Oh, that was Superman 75.
75, 123. I think Flash, Billy.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking Flash 123, right? Sorry. But what led to we're going to kill him? Like, how did that editorial meeting go? Was Paul Levitz? What led to that decision? And I mean, it was just a lightning bolt that,
Well, everybody signed off on it when we pitched it. The thing was that was
who pitched it? Who'd you pitch it with?
We were in one of our meetings. We had gone to Florida. It was 91, I want to say, and it was right around the time of Desert Storm. While we were in Florida, the first Desert Storm had started, and we had pitched a storyline that had Superman and Clark and Lois Lane getting married, and we basically would break down stories in little, 2 lines or whatever in a chart, so all the books could be tied in. It was like 6 months worth of springboards. We thought we accomplished something, and apparently we had to then regroup and start over because there was some thought of saving the wedding for after the Lois and Clark TV show was on or something. Mm-hmm. So the thing about killing Superman was really, what I remember is different. Everybody has a Rashomon kind of thing where everybody remembers it slightly differently. What I remember is we went into this room and we felt a little bit annoyed maybe that we had to come up with substitute stories. And Dan pitched an idea of a big, strong guy who would just basically someone out of the blue, not that you expected, never saw him before. And he just basically big knockdown, drag out Marvel type fight. And everybody else in the room, not me, but everybody else kind of shot it down saying, oh, that's not the type of story we're known for. We don't just want to do a big action story. Then it went around and around and nothing got filled in the little boxes on the charts. And at a certain point, I said, what if we revisit Dan's idea and we make it our story? In other words, you could do your big action story, but it has to have consequence. And you don't just show it like a city being destroyed, like here's all these abandoned buildings. You show people being put out of their homes, and make it a realistic, for a comic thing, show the impact. Metropolis is destroyed. And that's what kind of got the other members of the group more interested. It's like, then we started thinking, what's a world like Superman? What's a world without Superman? And those stories kind of also lent themselves to what we were thinking. It's like everybody takes him for granted because he's the greatest superhero. And that the other connection I was going to say is before those meetings, Mike Carlin, Jonathan Peterson, Dennis Janke, we went to a comic store signing on a Saturday up in Connecticut. I think it was in East Hartford or past Hartford. And the only thing we could do was try to get comic stores to buy the books, and they didn't. Generally, we sold 70% of our comics on the newsstand, which was kind of dying out. And the companies made more money off of books sold through the comic stores, so they, of course, would like to do that. So our goal was try to do storylines that would get attention, and maybe the comic stores would order them. So we had assistant editor, Dennis Janke, me. We were working on Superman. We all go to this comic store signing on a Saturday, and they didn't have any books for us to sign because the store knew that we were coming to sign, but the store did not order anything other than what a couple pre-orders that people had ordered like on Wednesday. And we just sat there like, wow, this is terrible. And to me personally, that was a moment where I said, this is really bad. We need to reach these people somehow. And the only way to reach them was with big stories. So we did Panic in the Sky, and we did, Blaze Satanis War, and we did a bunch of stories where the 4 books, at that point it was 4 books where they cross over, so it was one big story. Mm-hmm. Because again, DC wouldn't let us do anything. The other editors would never want to tie into our stories. It was just it was like little fiefdoms. The Batman guy had his stories, the Flash guy had theirs, and nobody wanted. And at that point, there was no continuity, which is something that I tried to work on from the time I started on Superman, was to try to get some cohesive sense. So we kind of succeeded with the death of Superman, but none of the other books that came out in that month played along, except Justice League, which Dan Jurgens was also writing and drawing. Virtually none of the other DC titles even addressed that the death of Superman was going on, and they lost out on sales. Yeah, but they also lost out on being part of that big, would be a big storyline. So, but we really were trying to reach. We wanted to reach the comic stores. We wanted the comic stores to validate and accept that Superman was a viable character, and it wasn't your grandfather's character. So that was really the impetus. It was us pushing against that, and the fact that DC had a rule where they would not promote a book that was an ongoing. There's no promotional budget for issue 425, whereas there's a promotional budget for a number 1. So that's why we would do these. Mike Carlin would have us do house ads. We'd create art for these things. And most of the other editors out of the 40 books that DC published every month, a lot of times they'd miss their letters column deadlines because the editors had to put those things in. So if they missed the deadline, Mike had these house ads sitting
ready to go.
Yeah.
So
Amen, brother.
Books
Amen.
had to go to the printer, throw that house ad in. So we wound up getting good promotion within the line.
I had no idea that was the case, but that's really cool. Hey guys, it's top of the hour. I gotta cut out. But Jerry, I definitely want you doing an Overstreet cover sometime soon, man.
Oh, I think that was it you who did it not that last year, or
yeah, and you were busy at the time. We got to work it out.
I would still like to do it. I worked on the Superman one back in the 50th. I did. I guess it was LB Cole. I was officially.
Oh yeah.
But I did the drawing. I didn't realize I did a line drawing, and I guess he painted it and maybe.
I had no idea. That's great.
Yeah.
So well, we definitely got to talk further. The one thing before I get out of here, TJ's got a really good question now. Do you see that one? Actually, it's just a statement, but it would make a good question about John Henry Irons.
Oh, I don't think he got wasted. I think he's been forgotten maybe in a way since New 52.
Yes.
I mean, they used him. The last that I remember was he was used in the New 52, but they haven't. I mean, that's a cyclical kind of thing. I put a lot of work into Gangbuster, and Gangbuster's like really one of the few Hispanic characters, and it meant something to me because I grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood. All my friends were, Hispanics, and that character got it. I felt like once I left Superman, nobody cared and nobody did anything with him, and I always felt like he deserved better. But you have no.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Actually, sort of with both observations. I think that both characters had a lot to offer. And when I was mentioned earlier, I was a Marvel kid, and I thought Superman was boring. And as it turns out, it was Superman in the hands of writers who thought Superman was boring.
Right.
Because once we had great writers like you on there, I found the character every bit as captivating as it should be. That goes for his supporting players too. Anyhow, guys, I want to say good night and thank you for having me on, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, OB.
Thanks, don't work too hard. Now, let me ask you. So basically, like after the death of Superman, we were now given four different Supermen, right? What spawned the idea of the Supermen?
Well, again, I was part of the first half of that meeting because my last issue was Adventures 500. So at that meeting that we were planning the return, I was there for the first day up through all the stuff that happened in Adventures 500, including that we used each of the four characters. The second day is when they worked out the whole storyline with Mongol and Coast City and everything else. But what I remember from the room was that everybody showed up. Carl Kiesel had joined, taking my place on Adventures. So Carl, Dan, Roger Stern, Louise Simonson, and John Bogdanov all came with their own idea of which character they would pitch as is he Superman or is he not Superman? But it was originally going to be one character. So Mike Carlin was supposed to choose. And at some point during that meeting, I think Louise might have said it, but then Carlin was the ultimate arbiter of that. He said they're all good, but if we do them all. And my main contribution to that meeting was just because, previews would always give away the covers 3 months in advance, which is hard. It was before the internet, but it was the equivalent of the internet of somebody spoiling something, because if Superman's dead and you start soliciting books, I said, this is your one moment where people don't know what Superman's either going to look like or what he's going to be like when he comes back. So I said, if there's some way for you to either withhold the images, and then Carlin came up with this top secret, totally blacked out with top secret stamped across it for the previews. as a way to keep fans from getting information 3 months, or I think for previews might have been 4-month lead time, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
So it was a long stretch. So that was my big contribution, was really just to get them to keep a tight lock on what the secrets were, you know.
I mean, that was a crazy time. I remember, going to the, here in where I grew up in Connecticut, we had a place called Card Castle. And when that all happened, I mean, it was packed, everyone's trying to get their books, and that whole storyline all the way up until the return. I mean, the Superman books were flying, at least here where I am locally. I have them all. I think I'm going to be a millionaire someday. Collector items.
Well, I have an interesting story about that, if I may. Mitch, you were talking about the latest speculator thing, with the new Joker book. I saw that Brian Hibbs had written something about it. Well, I worked at home and I lived in Queens. My girlfriend, my wife today, who's my wife, she worked in Manhattan. I'm like, honey, you got to go to Jim Hanley's universe in Manhattan, and you got to get me Superman number 175, right? So 75. Superman 75, right? 75.
Yeah.
So it's in the bag. It's out today. It's like, well, I can only go on my lunch break. So she was a professional, and she's all dressed up, whatever. Just, this young 22-year-old woman, 23-year-old woman walking into the comic shop saying that she needs the book. And the book was already at lunchtime at $10.
Yeah.
Wow. Right? It might have been $15. And so she said, okay, well, my boyfriend wants it. So she bought it. And then he said, well, if he's interested in that, you should look up on the wall here. And behind them, they had several other books.
Right.
And the other books were other, collectible books. You know what I mean? This one for $20. This one for another $15. This one for another $10, to try to get as much money from this young woman that they can. And my wife, thought about it. And because the Superman, the number 75 was on the shelf, but next to 75 in the bag books was 74, 73, 72, 71, all still at what, $1.25 or whatever the cover price was.
Something like that.
And she said, these people in the industry you want to get into are really dumb, because this is not going to last. That I walk in there, instead of bringing you and making you a new fan or bringing an old fan back, and to buy the 5 books preceding the battle, you know what I mean? 75. He tried to sell me one $25 book.
Right.
Yeah, they're trying to hustle.
And she goes, that's what's wrong with this industry. And she goes, but you know what? We can do this. You know what I mean? Like us to do the book. And it's just interesting how even back then you say it's coming back, right? But I mean, that really was the real beginning of the speculator, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I really went into high gear, or maybe it was the high water mark.
I was gonna say, I see the variant cover guys. They'll come into the shop, and they're there like before the store opens. They're in the parking lot, and I know the owner, so I walk in and let me in before the door is supposed to officially open at 11. But these guys would come flying in, and they start rifling through the books. And I remember there was an Ant-Man book that came out about a year ago, and I'm a big fan of art. Got my degree in art. I can draw too, so I'll just pick up the cover that appeals to me because I just like the graphic on it. So I picked up this one Ant-Man book. I love the artwork, and I'm walking around the store, and I'm talking to the owner, Pat, and this guy is like stalking me. And he's just like looking at me like a dog, like if you have like a sandwich and your dog's hungry and it starts to drool. And Pat and I are talking, and the guy's giving me the stink eye. And I look over and go, you all right? You got a problem? And he says, that book you got there. I go, what, this? He's like, yeah, you want it? I go, well, yeah, I got it in my hand. I don't understand. And he's like, how much you want for it? And Pat's saying, I'm looking at the book going, I don't want anything for it. I'm going to buy it.
Yeah, when I buy it, read the book.
But I want that one. I go, well, there's about 7 of them over there. Why don't you get? No, I want that one. I go, why do you want this one? I need that cover. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? You don't even know what the story is, And it was just hysterical. And I said, no, I'm not going to give you the book. I picked this one because I want it. Get out of here. But the thing about variant covers is, and I've talked to guys that own comic shops, within about 5 or 6 months afterwards, that one-off cover, not all of them, but one of them, you can go on eBay and suddenly they're like, the prices dropped to $5 and almost cover price on a lot of stuff. Yes. But it's that crazy supply and demand mentality. Oh my God, I got to have it right now. I'll pay you $50 for that cover. It's like, dude, it's $3. What's the matter with you?
Well, I was going to mention to Billy your experience with your wife buying a book off the wall at a marked up price or whatever. That was something that DC was really good at. What Marvel wasn't. Marvel liked the idea of a book selling out and having it, because it did foster the comic stores to buy more Marvel books, because there were more Marvel books sitting up there that were suddenly rare or whatever, even though they weren't rare, but they were hot. DC always had a program for second printings. They would, if a book sold out, their idea was, we want to get it into the most hands of readers.
Yeah.
We're not worried about the speculators. We want the readers to have it. And like with Superman, when it sold out, they did a second printing, they did third printing, they did fourth printing, they did a fifth printing. They wanted to get it out there because it was a popular book in the real world, which would draw people to comic stores, as opposed to just, I've got this prize and now I'm going to go sell it somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
The difference was, back then you could certainly do that, but again, it was not the model that the comic stores liked or wanted.
No.
They would rather have that thing sell out, and that was one of the things that worked against on Superman. We had, when I did issue 50 and Superman and Lois got engaged, that was like suddenly a big book. And I remember that exact conversation was with people up at DC. It's like, well, if you let it sell out, it's going to be on the wall, and that will enhance our reputation. So maybe, is it worth doing once?
Yeah.
Like, no, we're going to do a second printing. So I understand that, but we all work for an audience. We don't just want somebody to buy. We're not selling paintings.
Yes.
We want somebody to read our stories.
Yeah.
When you write something, even drawing something, you're putting something yourself. You want somebody to enjoy that the way you enjoyed comics when you were a kid. That's always been my goal, is that
it's got to be flattery saying, oh, my book is so hot, everybody's got to get it. But like I said, I don't think they're going to open that book up, because it won't be 9.8. Right, but open the cover, it's going to reduce the value or whatever it is. They're not reading that story.
Now they get them graded and put in plastic, and they never do open them up unless you cut them open.
Well, we had at the New York Comic Con, we did 500 copies of our New York Comic Con edition of She, and they were $10 each. And we know it, every single person who picked that book, and we bagged them, boarded them all, pulled them out, and everyone.
No, I know.
I didn't even know, the grading, and they just look.
No.
Like,
I just fold it and put it in my back pocket.
No. That's what's great. That's what's great about Peter Samedi with Alterna Press, is that Peter Samedi is printing books on, like, what I like to call high grade super white newsprint.
Yeah. I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah, and he sells them for $1.50.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it, and when we start going through Diamond again, I'd like to do this myself with it. They're almost like you roll them up, put them in your back pocket, bag with, you know what I mean?
That's why those reprint books that they sell for $1 are great, because it's $1. I don't care. I got it in my spinner rack over there because it looks like the original cover, but it's $1. If it gets ripped, I'm not going to cry about it. And that's, if I had my kids were little, those are the ones I would give them to get them into the hobby. I would say, here, read this, because I'm not going to go crazy if they draw on it. Hey, look. It sounds crazy, but I remember being a little kid in the 70s, and my mom would buy me a stack of comics, and, I'd be bored, and they'd have puzzles, especially the DC ones. They'd have, like, find a word or some kind of mystery puzzle you had to decipher. Don't say it, but I would draw on my books. I'd be like that. Or I want to send away for the Conan the Barbarian gold coin. And guess what I would do? I'd cut the book up, and I'd save those value stamps, coupon it, So... God, that would never happen now. Well, they don't have ads in comics anymore, but still.
But that's why books were actually valuable, was because most people just beat them up and away.
Yeah. Now that's the whole love of it, and that's why I really love the model that he's doing with Alterna.
Yeah. Well, do you think if they sold them again? Do you think if they sold them again at like 7-Elevens or the corner gas stations, if they brought back a spinner rack, they would have an audience again? Because I miss that. So. I remember going in the summer, going to the 7-Eleven, getting a Slurpee, trying to get a good cup, and you'd grab whatever comic. I remember getting Giant Size X-Men #1 for, I think, 50 cents? And just take it down to the beach and read it. Oh, this is a great story. And rolled it up, put it in the back pocket. Yeah, that's an experience nobody's going to get nowadays. They don't understand that you could just walk into a soda place, get a soda, get a whatever chewing gum, and then buy a comic book. That'd be great.
Well, that
sad
is
thing
happening.
it's the really sad thing, Mitch, is first of all, I say absolutely that would be the case, especially on how the forefront of pop culture comic books are now, with the movies and everything like that, and the CW shows. And what the sad part is that you have both Marvel and DC, these huge publicly traded companies, which it seems the perception to a lot of us in the industry that they look upon the comic book division of their companies as a tax write-off.
Yeah.
And they can afford to do spinnerback, returned, 7-Eleven, shoots, you know what I mean? That type of books. They can afford to do that because they can afford to lose that money, or say, and use it as a tax write-off, if you will.
Yeah.
But they can reach such an audience.
The only time you'll see a superhero
to promote a movie, they'll spend $100.
I was going to say, if I go into the corner gas station now, I'll see a can of Dr. Pepper. I got them over here. They'll have the Captain America or Thor on the can. They'll have Doritos with the characters on them. They'll have candy bars with the candy. But they're spending money on that type of stuff to get the word out there. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw that wrapper away. I'm going to throw this away. What if I had a book that I could actually go and read the story? And I've said this to Jerry before, and somebody at a movie theater told me the reason why they don't do it is because the movie theaters don't want to keep inventory. But if there's a new Captain Marvel movie out there, if there's a new Batman movie out there, you don't have to have the weekly comics in there, but why don't you have a trade in there? Why don't you have a collected works or something? Why don't you have the dollar comics, just a couple, and leave them on the candy counter? Because I'm sure some mom and dad, they're overspending $12 on a thing of popcorn and some soda. Oh, here's a dollar comic for the kid. Here you go. Get your greasy popcorn fingers all over it. Throw it in the trash.
It costs them money to put that on the counter, just like Mitch, as far as putting your cards to promote your shows. It costs you money to put that on in the place.
But I'm trying to. But I do that. But I'm trying to grow my audience, though. It's trying to brand awareness. You try to get people to know about it. The
movie companies are not interested in helping comics. That's the sad truth. Is they've had since Spider-Man in 2002 or 1, whenever it came out. That's almost 20 years of billions of dollars made on the characters, and none of that money has been directed back to the companies to help sell comics.
Right. Well, I told you, even the fact
focus changed when the collapse happened. The focus changed.
I was going to say, why don't they advertise DC Universe before the Harley Quinn movie? If you like Harley Quinn, why don't you go subscribe for $7 a month and you can watch the animated cartoon? If you're going to go watch Wonder Woman. What?
Read comics online on that site.
You can read they do. They have them on there too. I was like, it made no sense to me. Okay, you're not going to put the comics on the counter, but you can't put a 30-second ad up on the screen that says, oh, you're in the audience, you're captive, you're not going anywhere. At the end of old Superman TV shows, they would say, Superman is based on a character appearing every month in DC Comics. Or It doesn't kill you. You already got the guy there. They're waiting for the after credits to see the scenes for the next movie, the post-credit scene. Throw a stupid ad up there. You just saw the Joker make $1 billion. You can't tell me, you can't say, want to read about the Killing Joke? You want to read Brian Azzarello's The Joker? Go download DC app on your phone, because they're all on the stupid phone anyway in the movie theater, Give them a coupon that they get 30-day free trial. It's not that freaking hard. And I say this from a guy who worked in marketing for 30 friggin' years. And when I see stupidity, I have to call it out and go, like Jerry said, they don't want to grow it. They don't want it. Then if you're going to just kill it, just end it now. Just pull the plug on it. License the characters to Marvel. If you're DC, let them run with it. Give them to Disney. Let Disney make
Marvel's not helping the comic sales either. That's what I'm saying. Movies aren't.
It's so frustrating to watch this just fall apart sometimes. You're like, guys.
Yeah.
Well, when we did the Batman movie in '89, there was a big effort on the part of DC the circulation department, to try to get the Batman movie comic in movie theaters. And they actually, they struck a deal, and they had it was like I think it was a $4.95 or $3.95, the square bound Batman movie comic on the counters in movie theaters. They paid per location to have the little box with the comics in it. Box, like $5 a location, something like that. And they sold probably out of the amount of, there had to be at least close to 200,000 in sales just in movie theaters. And Warner Brothers wouldn't let them sell it on the opening weekend. So that all sold from week 2 on. They sold like 170 some thousand copies, I think.
Yeah.
But those are people who probably don't have access or didn't have access to a comic store. And then the back of the book, there's a comic store locator.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if Dan DiDio spearheaded this or what, but the recent Walmart DC books where you'd go in and for $4 you'd get a 100-page giant like we had when we were kids. You got a 12-page news story by Tom King or Bendis, whatever. Yeah, and that you couldn't find them. I remember we wasted like how many times driving around, hitting a Walmart, running in there, and then when you did find them, they're not with the magazines because that would make sense.
Yeah.
They're up front in a little tiny point of purchase box up near the Magic the Gathering cards and the little toys on the way out the door. So if you weren't looking, and even if you were, it was like, where's Waldo? You wouldn't find those books. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy.
Last year I did a comic for Target with the toy line that the
DC the Funko thing.
Primal Age, and we did a comic that it had its own cardboard little box, little stand.
Yeah, by Marv Wolfman, yeah.
I would go to all these places and would not find it. Then I found some on the DVD,
it was in the record DVD section in the back. I remember that.
Other places, you'd ask people at the store and they knew nothing about it.
I remember calling you and telling you they're out. I remember taking the box and bringing it over to the toy section, and I put it underneath the toys because if the kid wanted to get the Batman toy, oh, look, there's a book right underneath it. But you know what killed that? You know how much the book was? $10.
Yeah.
You can't sell something like that. $10.
How much is a toy, though? I mean, they were trying to make it.
Toy was like 15.
But they're making it a comparable thing for Target.
They included the comic in the toy. They should have just wrapped it around back or give you a download
comic in each toy.
And it is free money. It's you don't have to do the newest book. You can do a book from 2 years ago, from 5 years ago.
Right. Exactly.
And the reprints are selling better than the new books right now. Anyway,
I've heard that. No, I'll go with story. Yeah. Yeah.
Dan was lamenting at the last, was it at Comic Pro or the Diamond thing?
San Diego, about the reprints are selling more than the new books. And I was like, is that a compliment to the old creators, or is that like, uh-oh?
Here, I'm going to pull a toy off my wall and show you something.
Oh.
Hey, you do have like a line, like Mitch Breitweiser, and he has Alliance. They just made a deal with Walmart. They're going to actually have their cardboard display with their, 5 or 6 different series, and they're going to be in the books, in the magazines. And they actually now have a deal. They're going to be in every Walmart, and is it Walmart and Target or Walmart? Just Walmart's right now, Billy. But they are making their way into it, and I know
they have a deal with Walmart. They're talking to other big retailers, giant, chains too.
You're going to start seeing the big Alliance display with his books in it now.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You know how they have the iTunes and you get the every month iMusic or whatever it's called, and you can get any record album that's out there or whatever. You can just pay $9 a month or $10, and you can listen to anything. You don't own it, but you just listen to it. Why can't you do something? I know they have digital books and all this stuff, but they have Comixology. What?
That is what the DC app does. You basically watch it.
But no one knows.
No one knows. Yeah.
They stopped promoting it. Yeah, they stopped promoting it.
They stopped promoting it. I think it's going to go away, to be honest with you. I don't know.
I don't even know if it's working half the time. I have to go double check. Oh, it's still on. And remember when it came out? You couldn't use it on certain platforms. I remember telling you.
They hadn't. It was on app. It was on Apple, but it wasn't on Netflix. I
had to go out and buy a Fire Stick and put that in my TV. I'm like, I don't want to watch this on my laptop or something. I want to watch it on my big 50-inch screen or something. I want to see the Swamp Thing.
The content is good that they have on there.
There's tons of comics on there. The problem is they're all decisions above any of our pay grades. I mean, I think in comics, we've been arguing getting comics accessible for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And we worked throughout the 80s because the newsstands was really dead. I think Shazaam, there was still a minor version of the newsstand market, like in grocery stores or whatever. So it was a small amount of books. But it died, and then it's like, how do we reach kids? And there was a certain point, I think it was when Joe Quesada he had taken over at Marvel, and Joe said it's just a crazy statement, but he said the so-called kid market for that kid doesn't exist, and that was their justification to not reach out. And that's a stupid thing.
Silly.
Look
They
at
don't gear towards kids anymore.
Well, they weren't doing books, but that's the thing. At that time, I remember talking to, I think, Tom Brevoort. It was around 2000, and they were doing some facsimile comics. I think there was Target had done like a series of maybe 10 issues of Marvels that they were exactly like they were published in the 60s.
Yeah.
And he had said the reason they do that is because a Target or a big retailer doesn't want to take stuff that they can't be sure of the content. And the comics code was long gone by then, or had just kind of gone by the wayside. So it was an issue of, these old comics we know are kind of vetted for kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't give them a current issue of Fantastic Four at the time because it was more adult.
Yeah.
With Batman, with DC and stuff. So there's your market, like you were saying, when you have the true believers. If those things are selling well, it's a reason, and it's not just guys who bought them or thought they were cool 20 years or 30 years ago. It's that there's nothing else that's accessible for kids.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if AT&T repackages the DC universe into the HBO Go, because look at Disney Plus. They go and grab Marvel. You go turn on Disney Plus. There's about 50 years of Marvel cartoons on there. We've got Spider-Man and his amazing friends. We've got the Hulk. We've got the X-Men cartoons. There's tons of content. That's all people want to see. Little kids are watching X-Men cartoons from the 90s now that they've never even heard of again. The DC app, we have all the years of the Batman animated. We have all the other Justice League shows. All that's on there, but no one knows this app exists right now. No one's using it. No, it's not getting new customers. So if they put it on a high-profile media format, maybe it'll have a region. I don't know. It's just frustrating to watch.
They went hard. They went hard with it, and then they
HBO because the AT&T deal happened right around that time.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably they've given up on promoting it, but they'd still.
Well, are they going to relaunch it though? It seems like you're just going to let this die. It's not a failed project. It's just.
It's a great app. I think it's a great app.
And the shows are great. You got Titans. Yeah, but you've got great content. You got Titans. You got Doom Patrol. You have the Swamp Thing, which they canceled before it had a chance to really grow. It's I don't know.
The DC app wasn't aimed at kids. I mean, none of the DC shows were aimed at kids. The only one that I think has the crossover thing is that Stargirl is going to debut on the CW.
Yeah,
it's also going to be broadcast on the DC app.
Well, they managed to do it with the CW for 8 years. How many shows they have? 6, 5, Black Lightning, Arrow, Supergirl. It works. I mean, if they weren't successful, nobody would be watching this. Smallville started 20 years ago next year, and it's been nonstop DC superheroes on the CW or whatever it was called, the WB back then. Yeah. So they know what they're doing sometimes. It's not like it's a lost cause here and no one's reading comics, but
they conquered the TV scene. They did, I always said DC conquered TV and Marvel conquered the cinema, But with the stuff they're doing, even with their app, I mean, the shows are great, but I do, the rumor is, it's all going to HBO Max, but I don't know, because they're making it's supposed to be an all consumption platform, so you can read comics, you can keep up with things, you have all the cartoons on there, you have many of the movies on there, and you have TV shows and its original content, and a lot of the original content's renewed for more seasons. The Swamp Thing, because supposedly it was a location
it was something to do with the incentives that Louisiana or wherever they filmed it.
North Carolina, they weren't getting the tax cut or whatever. They just said, we can't warehouse this swamp set, it's costing us more money to store it. Let's just pull the plug.
Yeah,
but they did a phenomenal job with it. Swamp Thing was great.
Well, think about it, if they had not built that giant set, they would have probably done a second season in wherever they're doing, like they go into Atlanta or somewhere else where they do have favorable, but they can't rebuild. The cost of rebuilding that giant tank and too big. They can't just transport it. But
there's also things. What about the argument that you know, that you can do it for different ages. I mean, you have the Teen Titans, right? You have the cartoon that my youngest is 13. He still loves watching it.
Yeah.
You have, you know, look at with Archie comics with Riverdale. Riverdale is not a show for kids, but they're still huge on the young market with their Archie comics.
Yeah.
So you can do it for both. You don't have to, you know, picture yourself like Joe had said that audience is in there. That's not true.
Yeah, but the focus was lost in the 90s because everything started to become like collectible. So what happened is they started focusing, like, as that generation was growing, like the Generation Xers were growing, they were growing the industry with them. And then in turn, what happened is then it's like the first set of Generation Y, which is me. You know, unfortunately, I'm the first year of a millennial, but you know, we grew with it as well. So what happened is now the books are still geared towards me at 35,
right?
And you know, and they're capturing me. Where, like, you know, when my kids grow up, they're probably not going to be captured by those books yet because it's not really written for them. It's not drawn for them, and nothing. The topics in a lot of the books now, you know, Cyclops and Wolverine are a couple now,
right?
You know, I mean, they're
always up with that. You know,
that's a storyline. Yeah. There's something.
But the thing is, don't you think? Here's the thing: the idea of kids or accessible books has been a problem for years and years, ever since the newsstand went away, and ever since the comic code went away. And it became a question of even giving out comics at Halloween. I used to always give away comics, and then it's like, well, I can't really, in good conscience, give away anything except like DC used to do the cartoon books.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Tunes,
Or I get Archies and give away Archies or something.
You know what, though? I got to say, that stuff wasn't non-existent when we were kids. Billy and I are the same age. I'm 1 month older than Billy. But I remember as a kid, you'd get those black and white Marvel magazines. You'd get the Conans, you get the Zombie, you get the Spirit. Well, yeah, nobody was paying attention.
First Savage, I think it was a Savage Tales or whatever, the one that
the naked around. Like, what's this?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that one had a mature rating on it. It said something like 17.
Let me just tell you, nobody at the 5 and Dime down the street was paying attention to that. You'd walk in, you get your pack of candy cigarettes. They look like cigarettes, but they were candy.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, man. And you're drinking your wax soda thing, rotting your teeth, and you're picking up a magazine.
And your licorice handgun so that you could pretend to the cops.
Yeah, with the cigarette in your mouth.
You had your shotgun, you're pretending to be Billy Tucci. Like, yeah, give me some of them funny books over there, Pops.
Yeah.
My dad wants a couple of them lottery tickets. Got to call Scala.
Yeah.
And while you're at it, you take something for yourself. Yeah. I'm just saying, there was mature books out there.
The mark of the squealer. You see the mark of the squealer.
But there was books out there I would read. Hey, man, I used to read Plop that DC put out, and I didn't know at the time it was probably being written by guys that were tripping on LSD. I was just like,
Orlando was on drugs.
Oh, it was just, was it Basil Worthington? Who did those covers? Wolfington or something? They were real strange. Wolverton. Yeah, I mean, you would pick that book up and go, I don't know what's going on here, man, but you know.
Sergio Aragones did a lot of stuff in there too.
I'm reading Captain Marvel, and Rick Jones is tripping on LSD, written by Steve Englehart. You're going to tell me that was written for a 7 or 8 year old kid? No, but hey, I don't know. He said it was vitamin C. I remember, like, really, vitamin C?
Englehart thought he was writing it for a 7-year-old at the time.
God forbid. Hey, dude, all I know is I saw Jaws. It was 1975. It was rated PG. It was horrific. Nowadays, it's like nothing. I would go to the movies and you'd see people getting shot and all this stuff. So you can't say that the audience is, you got to dumb it down. There was Richie Rich comics. There was Casper. There was hot stuff. But there was also, you know, Savage Sword, Howard the Duck. There was, it had different levels to it. So you don't have to. I still think they could do that now. I mean, you got Franco out
totally
there.
Do it now.
They did the Tiny Toons book. They're always doing stuff and art about.
Franco are amazing.
I know. So, I don't know about this argument. Like, you go into, there's nothing for kids. And the other thing that drives me nuts, I tell Jerry this all the time, is I hate
kids, though. That's what you have to determine.
Yeah.
There's a market that's like Franco's book probably ages out at 12,
maybe,
10.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe you give a book from 10 to like 16.
Let me just tell you.
But what are they doing on the market?
See this right here? worse than any adult comic book you could ever imagine, and they're all walking around with it.
Don't show your porn.
They type the wrong word in.
There's porn on your screen.
The whole other world there. No, that's a she cover. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, how dare you? How dare you?
Ouch.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, you know, where's the parents? You know, they got to step in too. You can't just like pawn it off on everybody. You know. And no, I was going to say the thing that I can't stand that I hear all the time, and Jerry says he heard this when he was getting into comics too. The comic books are going to be dead in the next 3 to 5 years. They're never going to be back. They don't exist. No one's reading them. The circulation's dead. They're going to the way of the dinosaur. Comics are on their way out. Bull. Okay, you got $1 billion movie, the biggest picture of all time now, the Endgame and the Avengers. They're not going away. The Joker just won the best actor in $1 billion movie. What are you talking about? You know, it's just people just love negative headlines. You know, they're just like, oh, you better not like that because it's passé and it's out of fashion. You know.
Well, when I got into comics, and it's really long time ago, but this summer will be 40 years. I got work at DC Comics, and at that time,
43, Jay. He's only 43.
I'm saying at the time, everybody was saying, "Oh, comics are going to be gone in a couple of years. They're on the last leg," and that's what the industry I got into. And they were printed as poorly as anything. At that point, they were printed on toilet paper with the bad old presses that were breaking down. And we lived with that until probably, I think, the offset stuff happened right after Superman, Death of Superman. So I mean, it's just like it's an unfulfilled prophecy.
Yeah, they had 10 friends in their life. They're the Jesus of the publishing world. They just keep coming back from the dead.
Yeah,
well, they don't die because
Paul Jenkins here.
I know
they're not going to die. Maybe the industry as we know it, you know, I mean, especially with the direct market of just how the big two don't seem to really
deliver them to you
on that, you know. But
Billy, with I hate to say with age comes wisdom, but we're both pretty wise, I think. The thing that I think about, you know, I know Mitch is going to go. No, one thing that occurred to me actually since the 90s and since when we made big royalties on Superman, the potential was so huge. I mean, we were getting checks. I didn't stay around. I mean, I left. And I earned a couple of big checks, but I left. I left the books because I was ready to leave. But when you get a check for $100,000 for a royalty on a comic book, granted, you're selling a lot of copies. But what it says to me is that the comic companies have always made money off of this, but their job has always been to present an image of doom and gloom because it keeps page rates down. You ask for page rating. Oh, can't give you a page rate increase. When books sold like the Superman books or whatever book sells 1 million copies, it puts a lie to it and it's harder for them to kind of hide that. But they've always been profitable. You know, I mean, you and I could do the math, and you've done a lot of self-publishing, so you know what a break-even point is, and you know, like Marvel and DC, especially DC, had so many staffers, and every one of those staffers, when the Superman books did well, they added staffers, so they were very, very top-heavy as far as employees. All of them earning maybe not the best salaries, but they were earning benefits beyond what they were paying freelance.
Right.
So I think it's like a lie that's perpetuated for a reason, just like the movie companies rarely want to get to a hit so that somebody doesn't get their, you know, back end royalties or whatever, you know, on some movie. The same with the publishing industry is notorious for it. So
I got to ask this to Billy because Jerry and I talk about this on the Power Cosmic podcast too. How as a creator does this hamper your ability to create a new story? Because you go, oh my God, why would I pour my heart and soul into this book and draw it and write it and all this if it's going to a dead audience, if no one's ever going to see it? Why don't I try to sell it as a screenplay, which the odds you getting that made into a movie are probably like 1,000,000 to 1. I mean, as a comic book creator, does that really just set you off? Like I might as well go work down the street.
No, there's still an audience.
Yeah, I've never experienced anything like that. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of creators, and I've been told to my face by them that they're writing a movie. They are creating a property so it could become a movie or it could become, you know, a television series. And that is a recipe for disaster. You know, Yeah, I mean,
You're writing for something. You're writing for something.
the one thing I found is as Jerry was saying about that, you know, the mainstream Marvel and DC will break your heart, and Darwin Cook said the same thing to me one time. You pour your heart, your soul out into a character that you love. You know, you love this character. You think you have a great story. It goes through so many levels, right? Jerry, right, goes through a couple of levels. Yeah, that's great. Oh, can you break that down into a 6-issue miniseries or something? You spend 2-3 weeks breaking it down into 1 page, 2 page, you know, little breakdowns for the issues, and then one person says, yeah, we're going to pass on that for now.
Right.
You know, and they'll literally break your heart. And I know I'm getting away from the question a little bit, but what I love about the freedom about the crowdfunding now is that through Indiegogo or through a Kickstarter is that you're going directly now to the fans. We are surpassing all that we've just been complaining about for the past hour and a half. Now we're going directly to the readers, and we're giving the readers what they want. And if you're not giving the readers what they want, they'll tell you buy their pocketbooks.
But I think it's great that avenue exists. But here's the problem I have with it, and it's not a problem with the actual process. But say you do a successful Kickstarter, how many people are you reaching? You're actually selling your own book for more money to less people in a way. I mean, maybe you got 2,500 people would be a successful, fantastic Kickstarter. But ultimately, you know, we're used to audiences that would be larger than that. But the good thing about it is,
the whole thing is that this is a great way for independents to compete because you do this first to finance your book. And now we have a meeting with Diamond, and in 2021 or late 2020, we have to see, we're going to start putting all the She books back through Diamond, all of our crowdfunded books. But we're also, now we can go to the retailers, and I can go to the retailer summit, and I can talk to them and say, these books are all done. These books have been financed. These books have been, you know, have already been written. They've been illustrated. They've been printed to some certain extent. And I can give guaranteed ship dates to those retailers too, which will allow me as an independent creator to compete. And I think you get those, say, 2,500 backers, which is huge, and we're over 2,500. I think 2,600 backers now total for She. But those 2,200 backers, I can rely on a great portion of them coming and helping support me when I put out the $2.50 She. If I can do that with the cheaper paper, because I want people to read it, and then it's not much of a risk for the retailer. Because we also have to be honest. I think what Marvel and DC are doing to the retailers isn't fun to them at all. That they're forcing them to buy 500 copies of a certain cover so they can get that special Captain Marvel cover, from Marvel, from Marvel Comics, because the movie's coming out. That film came out last year, two years ago, right? How many retailers still have 50 copies of that Captain Marvel #1 on their shelf?
Oh yeah,
and it's tough because by the time, when you get a previews magazine and they order Marvel and DC books, that Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, they're all in the front. When it comes down for the independents, we're titled The Best of the Rest, it's called. And now Crusade Comics in 1997, Jerry, was on page, say, 23 in previews. Now we're on page 327.
Oh yeah, and the catalog is hard to parse through. I mean, it's like
it's catalog.
It's really like homework every month. I have to go through the whole catalog, but I have to special order stuff that I want to see. Or if it's a friend of mine's book or whatever, I special order it because there's no guarantee it'll be at the store when I get there. So I do go through it every month, and I pick out stuff that I think might be.
You want to know what? You'd be surprised. I use that to help find guests for the show.
Yeah.
I'll actually go when I'm trying to plan for TERRIFICON guests. I get the previous book, and I start going through it, and I start reading little updates. And then you start seeing certain names that are on more than one book, and you're like, oh, this guy's or this woman's the new hot creator out there. And, this is what they're reading, because you can't just stick with the top 10 books that when you walk in, the Spider-Man, the Batman, Superman, that stuff. It's all these other independent books, especially from Image and IDW and Dynamite, all these other books that are coming out every month that have a whole bunch of new creators. I just told Jerry what was it? The Butcher of Paris by Stephanie Phillips. It was about a serial killer in occupied Paris. Dark Horse, yeah. But it was like, it's a great story, and she's a great creator, but it's not something I would have even known because the local shop, I didn't think even ordered it. I had to go get it. Right. Yeah, but it was in previews, and that's how I first read about it. And I go, wow, that's a real cool thing. It would make a great movie that there's a serial killer running around Nazi-occupied Paris during World War II. That, like, this is cool. But it didn't stop her from being creative, though. That's what I was trying to say to you before. Do you sit there and get discouraged and go, oh, well, woe is me? Hey, I tried to be a comic book guy back in 91 when I got out of college, and I had my book with me, and I would go to the conventions, and I would get yelled at by Howard Chaykin, and I'm trying to sell the book. But it was discouraging because, that was like getting into the major leagues. You didn't have these outlets like you have now with your crowdfunding books. You either got a gig working for Marvel or DC, or maybe you worked over at Charlton if they were still around. And that's it. And then if it didn't work, you hung it up and you went to go work in advertising or doing catalog work like I did. But
I did go through a period where I had a lot of self-doubt a few years back. And then I discovered this thing that this is giving me a chance. And what was cool is that I guess maybe the nostalgia aspects of it, or maybe I stopped when we were selling 30,000 copies a month of it. I just got burnt out. I really did. I just got tired. I had hired other writers to write the character. It really had gotten away from me. I mean, it was doing well, financially for us, but it wasn't what I wanted. And then I had an opportunity to work on all these cool comics I loved as a kid. You know? Yeah. So, but then I got discouraged about it, because, I'm like, and I'm looking at my friends and I'm talking to Terry Moore, who has a steady readership, but Terry's numbers haven't changed in 20 years, he says.
Yeah. Look at ElfQuest.
Which is great for a black and white book, but you get discouraged. So I'm like, oh boy, wow, we were always a full color book. Yeah. What do I do? And that's why I love this whole thing with it. I think with this crowdfunding aspects and how you can take and then put that into the mainstream is that it gives us a chance to compete and with the majors, and but it also is a new golden age of self-publishing. It's a new golden age of creator-owned properties because anyone can do it.
Yeah. How much do you rely upon the fan base? Because I love doing the conventions, and I love that whole old school Merry Marvel Marching Society. We were just talking about that in the last show. Jerry said he used to send away and you'd get the kit in the mail. And I said, oh yeah, I remember sending away, and you got a later version of it. You had Foom, Friends of Old Marvel and stuff. And that created a community out there. That's the guys that come to my show. There's people like me that go to the shops that we never outgrew that stuff. Are those the people that follow your book after 20 years, Billy, and they still sit there and support whatever you put out and go, hey, I'm a Tucci team member, and whatever he's doing, I'm going to follow it? I mean, is that lift your spirits when you're sitting there with self-doubt and go, hey, I'm not doing this for me. I got a fan base out there that's waiting for me to hit the next home run. Yeah, I mean, does that ever come into play in your mind?
Well, it's all about the fans, and they've stayed with me. And again, I'm really fortunate too, Mitch, because I was able to do mainstream work.
Yeah,
I eased right into that. I was first a self-publisher. I was an indie creator.
Yeah,
and then I guess because I became friends with so many editors, and Paul, I had lunch with Paul Levitz. I think Paul Levitz liked having lunch with me, or Mike Carlin. Or we would have drinks at the bar, not really Paul, but having drinks at the bar at San Diego, because I never had to ask them for anything.
Right.
We just became like friends, or we had a respect for our love through the books and through the crap. And then it wasn't so bad when I'm like, I have an idea. So if I just say, can I pitch you something? And I guess because of the certain amount of success we had, they kind of said, yeah, that sounds like let's take a shot on him.
Well, Levis was an original fanboy. I mean, him and Paul were comic reader. Maybe that's what's missing with a lot of the new corporate guys. They're not, or the corporate heads, male or female. They're not fanboys and girls. They're not. They didn't grow up with this stuff. They either they don't know the characters, they don't know the history, they don't know the legacy. And they're just assigned. It's just like selling soda. But
you also have the new crop of creators that are basically going out there saying, "Oh no, we want to change this."
Yeah.
and they're unabashed. You know, they are proud to say they want to change this. They don't care about the lore. They don't care about the history. They're not like like what Chris had said about you know, your back issues are your gateway to the success. You know what I mean, for your new books. You know, they don't care about any of that.
Isn't there an audience for that type of book, and there's an audience for old school?
I don't think there's an audience for that type of book.
They're not allowing that audience anymore. That's the problem. They want to change. They're changing so much that it's really pushing out. And that's why back issues are selling better than the new comics, because they don't like the stories. They don't like seeing their characters change. You know, I have nothing against. I support anything really. Any good book, anything great. You know, if you want to body positive characters, that's fine and stuff. Yeah. But there's people out there that don't. You know, there's people out there that want Superman to be muscly clad, just ripped. You know, they want Wonder Woman to look like a Greek goddess. I mean, they're superheroes. They're supposed to be at the peak physical condition. Yeah, you know, they're saving the world. You know, if I take my shirt off right now and I go save the world, people are gonna be like, "Oh, is that guy about to run out of breath?" Yes, I am. I am. I'm not a superhero. Don't model a superhero after me.
When you watch a television show or a movie, there's a reason why they have the most attractive men or women on there, because it's a fantasy. Right. It's not reality. It's the reality is looking in the mirror. Reality is looking at you three schmoes on this thing. And that's Brad Pitt is not reality. You know, Robert Redford wasn't reality. It was a fantasy. And if you're going to sit there and don't acknowledge that, then you shouldn't go watch a movie or read a book, because that's all that is a 2-hour fantasy story. I mean, I always get crazy when I hear people.
Wait, you were just telling me about how your wife liked the Hallmark Channel. I mean, that's all fantasy. Just the same way as superheroes are fantasy.
Oh, I know. But you don't see unattractive people on those shows, because it's just, you know, it's pipe dreams. You know, it's a fantasy.
The problem too is you've got a lot of, you know, new creators out there that maybe their product really isn't that good, so they get mad when they're told no. So what happens is now, and so let's say, you know, everybody gets a trophy type of thing. Generation Y doesn't like to hear no. Generation X doesn't want to say no. So what happens is now they're allowing certain things, and then they're basically saying, well, you're not letting my book's good. You just don't like it because I'm.
Look, I don't know about anybody else. And look, when I went to art school and you try to get your first gig and other gigs, you would go with your portfolio and you put your best foot forward, your best artwork. You would go there and say, "This is who I am. This represents my skill level, my talent." And you'd walk into an art director's office, because I had that job too. And sometimes they would just I had a guy eat a tuna fish sandwich once on top of my portfolio, and food was falling out of a sandwich onto my artwork. And I'm like, you son of a, you know what I mean? But
that's where you came up with that great oil technique.
Yeah, but you didn't always get the job.
Wash. No, you didn't. You had to accept it. You had to accept you didn't get the job.
There was 30 other guys in the lobby waiting with their portfolios, and you'd had to admit that some were better than you, and that's just the way it was.
Let me get in a word here. Wait, here's the thing.
Don't get me going, Jerry. Don't get me going.
No, here's the thing. I mean, all this stuff is valid, what you guys are saying. The problem that we exist in a world where there are too many choices. I don't mean as far as entertainment. So you have not one Superman book, you have like 5, but you have a flood of material. Because again, it's easier to do it. I'm not saying it's easier to do it well or whatever, but companies are marketing books that they would normally have canceled in the old days. Mm-hmm. You used to have a sales threshold that had nothing to do with anything except whether the book sold. It could be a great book, but if it sold 2,000 copies, it wasn't going to continue.
Right.
But what you've done is, by having Marvel and DC float books that really aren't financially feasible, is you've allowed little niche audiences. The same with TV. I mean, there's like 85 channels or 100, however many channels. Yeah. You can watch a show that is so targeted to you're somebody who collects lint out of belly buttons. There's probably a show for you. So, I mean, ultimately, none of these things are mass media anymore. They're all kind of niche things. So you could do a comic, and there's a lot of comics that appeal to a very narrow group of people, and it has nothing to do with anything except the companies will keep it going as long as they make money, or they see a reason to keep it out there to keep space on the keep space in the comic stores or previews or what have you. So the audience is really split up.
Will
It's
you
like-
ever see a book selling the hundreds of thousands ever again?
But we had 8 books, right? You're talking about the 8 comics. The other guy was talking about the 8 comics or whatever,
Yeah.
Marvel, starting with. When you have 8 comics, just like when you have 8 TV channels, you're
Right.
going to watch stuff that you normally wouldn't watch because there's nothing else on.
Yeah.
My kids would never watch black and white TV.
Yeah,
in a
mine
million
never
years.
watched black and white.
When I
No.
was a kid,
Yeah.
those were your opportunities. You had network TV and you had UHF, and they would show old movies. And if
Yeah.
there's nothing on, or if you don't want to watch whatever it is, the news, you would watch an old movie, and you'd learn, wow, this stuff is great.
The 4:30 movie, Channel 7.
Heck
Cool.
yeah, buddy.
Nowadays, there's just so many choices. That's the problem. I think it doesn't come down to whether something's good or bad. Like, I think there's tons of really good books being put out. I mean, I don't agree that comics are terrible, any of that stuff. I think
Right.
there's a lot of good stuff out there. I think a lot of stuff isn't necessarily targeted to my age group. It's probably even not targeted to a 40-year-old anymore. You know what I mean? It's hard to judge that because it's like, okay, I'm not the target audience, but I can still like something if the art is good. I can judge that if the story is good, but I may not want to read it because it doesn't appeal to me or something. You know?
Besides She, will there ever be a book that sells hundreds of thousands of comics in one issue? Or are those days long gone?
No, I think they will. I think with a film, I think, well, look at The Walking Dead. I don't know what The Walking Dead numbers were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think when you look at something like that.
Yeah. When that came out, everybody and their brother was running to the store and getting the trades to read the back issues of The Walking Dead. And then the book itself was a huge seller for a
They were
while.
selling millions of those trades,
Yeah.
and the comics themselves. So I think so, but I think
the
also,
potential's
Jerry,
still there, yeah.
that when we were talking about the audience that they're trying to sell to, there's 2 audiences. I think a lot of Marvel and DC are selling now to the Instagram audience and the Twitter audience, worse so.
Yeah.
But those people though aren't buying comics.
Yeah.
Because if it costs you $1 to every time you got to like something,
Right.
Yeah.
there'd be a hell of a lot less likes all over the place.
But
And
see,
they're
don't you
selling
think
to an
that-
audience that doesn't
that's-
exist?
But I think that's still also true in a negative way with people who are in my age group or people in their 50s who complain about stuff, is that generally I've found that those people who, because I have friends of mine who, will tell me, oh, everything's terrible. And it's like, when was the last time you bought a comic?
Yeah.
I haven't bought anything lately. It's like, well, you know what I mean? I think it's fair if you buy something, if you buy something and you don't like it, it's totally fair for you to have an opinion about it and to
Right.
express your opinion. But at a certain point, a lot of people seem to, like we were talking about negativity and stuff, a lot of people seem to enjoy just trashing somebody else's fun.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. That's what the internet was invented for.
That's the problem, yeah.
Well, but
Yeah.
it's, the internet was invented to look at funny cat pictures and dog pictures. I mean,
The
come on.
rainbows. Yeah. And what you had for lunch. Yeah. And
Well,
what-
Canadians are like, assholes, and now everyone, though, unfortunately, has a Twitter account.
But I do think, I think there's still books that are good. I mean, I always think of it, when you have kids, you reflect stuff through your kids' eyes too. And their world is very different than maybe the world I grew up in. But at the same time, if I crap on their stuff, or again, oh, the world is terrible, this is terrible, that's terrible. This is their world, and why should I rain on their parade? And I think there's an aspect of that. And I think it comes naturally to everybody to kind of not want change, but yet change happens anyways.
Mhm.
Like whether Superman, again, ridiculous, gigantic battles on the internet over whether Superman should have his underpants on or if he should have, you know what I mean? The design of these characters is not ever a big thing. Some stuff looks good, some stuff doesn't, but it's what they do with the characters that is always important. Like, what is a hero about? And how do you screw that up? Like with Superman is a character that has very specific parameters of, you write a Superman story, Superman's the most powerful guy around there. You don't want, I was aware of it when I was doing it, was you don't want a character like that to be scary, because he doesn't need to be. He needs people to trust him, because there's all these reasons not to trust him, because he's super powerful.
Yeah,
So
you
if
can flip
he
the
projects
things. Yeah.
a friendly persona, that puts people at ease more than if he was just always grim and gritty and intense. You know, I mean, these are character things, but really the same. Mitch and I have talked about Captain America or any of the classic characters. A hero goes above and beyond, regardless of the consequences to him or her. That's what a hero is about, not a self-serving person, and that's what I think superhero comics can sometimes lack, is an ideal that we grew up on, that, you know, right is right and wrong is wrong, as opposed to, well, everything's kind of gray now. You know, police can kill somebody, and, you know, soldiers can go nuts or whatever. Well, yeah, we know the real world isn't perfect.
Yeah.
But I think like a hero, you're writing this fiction, the hero should always be a hero. He can still have doubts. He can still make mistakes. But unless you're talking about the Punisher or you're talking about an anti-hero, the main guys still have to project something. And that's what when I was reading comics as a kid, that's what appealed to me. That's what I tried to always do in the stuff that I've written. Not that I can't write a bad guy, but I think, you know, ultimately it's harder to write a good guy than it is to write a bad guy. You know?
Because like the bad guy's total motivation is to defeat the good guy.
Yeah.
The good guy, you know, he's not just trying to defeat the bad guy, but he's trying to save the people that the bad guy is trying to hurt. You know what I mean? While he's trying to fight. So I love that his, you know, it's harder to be a hero than it is to be a villain.
As a kid,
like in movies,
Spider-Man was my favorite because he would do the right thing, but the police were still after him. And J. Jonah Jameson made everybody turn against him, but he would still do the same thing. He took the sacrifice, you know, personally.
Well,
that always appealed to me, you know.
Honestly, that's why I always was a Marvel fan more than the DC, because the Marvel characters, if you look at all the origin stories, they're all jerks. They're all self-centered, egotistical idiots who happen to come upon some strange power, and then they learn not to be that jerk anymore and to go and help the people around them. And that's a great story because they're flawed, where you have Superman who's perfect, and you have Wonder Woman who's perfect, and Aquaman. They're all these godlike beings that they don't have any flaws, where Marvel was realistic because Spider-Man got his powers. What's the first thing he did? Go on TV and try to make money, and then he didn't want to stop the bad guys from finding all of them. I mean, I think other than Captain America, who, you know, just wanted to volunteer and help his country and do anything to do that, everybody else was a jerk, though. I mean, before, Reed is so egotistical, he doesn't even think about the safety of his friends. And come on, let's go get belted by camera rays, or Bruce Banner's kind of a jerk too, in a way, you know. But I don't know.
You're talking about stuff. I wanted to plug a couple books that I don't have anything to do with, but I've been enjoying. And Mitch had recommended the Hulk book that's been running.
Oh, the Immortal Hulk. Yeah, that's great.
And it's a great book. But again, here's a case where I think this guy is crafting a story that does use all of the pieces that are already out there. So he does have the long continuity involved in it, but he's bringing something new to it. I read the 12-issue Invaders series that
Chip Zdarsky
had written, and that was really good. And you know, two artists working was Butch Geis and I forget the other guy who was drawing the current stuff, but it was a good book. There's a lot of stuff. The new Doctor Strange that Mark Waid's doing, I think, is really good.
Oh, very on that,
finding a hook for a character. But the other thing you were mentioning about the independent stuff and people writing for a trade paperback or writing for a movie deal. I just watched last night. I watched on Netflix a show called "I'm Not Okay with That." I think that was what it was called. But it's based on a graphic novel. Apparently, that was the same guy same person who did the End of the Effing World. That well, and some of the same creators working on this, and it was really interesting. But I'm thinking, like, above all, it's like it makes me kind of want to look up find those graphic novels, because the TV shows were actually interesting. And you had that with Umbrella Academy, didn't you, Mitch? Where you wanted to go back and get I
went to go get the trades because I never heard of it. And Jerry Ordway is the guy that wrote it, and it was a great. If the book was the book is anything like the TV show, I'm a fan of it because it was like the X-Men with an edge to it, you know, like the old school X-Men stories.
But see, there's a case where the TV in my case with the TV stuff was bringing me towards comics that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, or that I wouldn't have noticed, because some of these things are probably really low print runs, or who knows where they're sold.
Have you read The Sword of the Lunar Brothers? I have not. Have you, Jerry?
No, I don't know that.
The Sword by, I don't know that one either, Blevins.
And to go back to about, if you said the next 100,000 selling, 100,000 copy selling book, I have that. That's coming. I have the idea for that. I'll tell you when I see you.
Jerry and I
understand Jerry too.
I all have that idea, but I'm publishing it. I'm going to do it.
Here's a book. I remember when Jerry and I started doing just before the podcast, a couple years back, maybe 5 years ago. Look, I grew up John Byrne, loved John Byrne, Ordway, Simonson, all the guys from the 80s and late 70s. Those are the people I grew up with, right? But I don't see their books on the newsstands as much as I'd like to anymore. And why is that? Well, everybody wants what's new and fresh and hot, and the old guard is not in fashion anymore. So Jerry and I sat down, and I don't want to, reveal intellectual property, but we did. What about the Second Chance Squad, where you get these folks who are still in their prime and still, talented and all that, but the world is kind of like not paying attention to them as much as they used to.
They're
and I said,
huh? They're superheroes. They're not us.
They're real heroes. Wouldn't it be great if they all came back? Like they had to go get the guys that were the heroes of the late 70s and the early 80s, because there's a new threat that no one nowadays knows how to combat because everyone's forgotten.
Now you're giving away our special story.
Stop giving that away.
Hey, I have storyline.
We got to mute them.
That's why we have to get together. I have to head up there to Connecticut, and we all have to, and sit down and just listen to each other's and feed off each other's stories and things like that. I'm all excited. I want to hear it.
Oh, I know, but it was just one of those things that I would love to go out to the comic book shop and pick up a new issue that has artwork by John Byrne. Next month it's Walt Simonson. Next month it's Jerry Ordway, and on and on and on and on. I'm like, that would just blow my mind if that was all out there again. Roger Stern, right?
That would be very cool.
Wouldn't it? That would be. 12-issue series where each creator takes a crack at doing a version of the hero that they want to do or something.
Yeah, and not even that. I mean, even as any artist, like your style evolves over time too. So it's really cool to see their take on it. I think that's a great idea. I'm gonna steal that.
Start it, Mitch.
I gotta go.
Well, we're going 2 hours now, Nile.
Yeah, we should get. Yeah.
You ain't got nowhere to go.
I got nowhere else to go.
I'm just stuck in a room.
The pizza's on its way here now. I mean, this is just how we're getting rolling. I'm gonna take my iPhone out and record a new episode of the Power Cosmic Podcast.
You should have ran it. This could have ran a dual stream.
It would have got more listeners, that's for certain. Because if they knew Jerry Tucci's less talented brother Billy was going to be on, they'd listen.
Well, we'll do it again.
Jerry's laughing because he knows I do Billy Tucci impressions at the restaurant.
It always makes me laugh.
Yeah, I get the Long Island accent going, and I just go crazy.
I don't talk like that.
I think you haven't come off your physical. I think that when you went there and they checked you out. You want to hear an embarrassing story?
Yeah.
I was very physical 2 years ago, and the young physician's assistant who's checking my oil and all that stuff, after everything's all done, she goes, "Oh, I love your shows." I go, "I'm sorry, what now?" She goes, "Player," and she goes to my show. I go, "Well, we'll just keep it between us about the King of the Nerds and what he looks like."
River.
Kinda. That's what happened, and I was like, "Oh, I can never do another convention in Connecticut again." So,
did you tell her you loved that she warmed up her hands before she?
She might.
I'll be doing TERRIFICON Idaho next week, and you're all invited to come out to Sioux City. Good place to be.
Fantastic.
Thank you. But anyway, that didn't happen. Oh, by the way, Billy, did you go for the colonoscopy yet?
No, I got to set I told him I want to set the. He said you could do the new way, and I'm like, no, I want to go old school.
No, Billy, I did it without anesthesia.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, that's for a whole nother show.
Oh yeah, and I've got the video if you'd like to see it.
Oh my God!
It looked like
Is
Star Wars.
Ant-Man in there anywhere?
I want it. Oh,
Without
I
anesthesia.
apologize, Mr. Ordway.
Without anesthesia. And you know what's so funny? I've had it done 6 times already.
Mitch Hallock, the Rough Rider.
Oh,
6 times.
No, I'm just thinking about that now. Billy, let me know when you're going. I'll pick you up when you get on.
I'll bring the microwavable popcorn.
Tell Deb she can stay home and I'll take care of you. I'll just pick you up and then we'll drive you and I'll get you a tattoo.
all right. Now with a big smile on my face when I walk out, right?
And a custom
Oh, you have a
donut
smile
pillow.
on your butt when you walk out.
All right. This is.
TERRIFICON rocks right across the body.
See, can
Right
you picture
here.
John Romita and John Buscema having the same conversation? I can't.
Which John? Senior or junior?
Senior, yeah,
would.
Junior would have that conversation. You
Yeah.
should get Junior back at your show. He was at your show, wasn't he?
Never. He's right
Oh,
across
you need
the
Junior
water.
at your show.
I was at the old man's house a couple months ago. I was at Mr. Romita's house.
I'll make a call.
Yeah, you do that, Billy. How's my Rocketeer picture coming, Billy?
It's coming great. You're getting 2 of them.
Oh, yeah. Debbie said you were working.
One from Jerry and one from me.
Well, I can't wait to see Jerry's. I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
Jerry's will be drawn with my right hand.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, boys. It really has.
Well, before we go, let's can we talk about TERRIFICON a little bit? The prep that's been going on and all the posts that are popping up with. Holy shit, man.
Before, I like it when the creators call me up and go, am I coming to your show? Yeah, well, you haven't announced me yet. I go, there's 6 months before the show. If I get it all today, I got nothing to talk about. So a little bit at a time. I always save Billy for the last. He's the last guy to go up there. Oh, maybe. I don't know. No, it's a show that's all about comic books. It's if you like artwork, you like artists, you like writers, you go to TERRIFICON. You want to meet some celebrities, that's fine. We got some of them too. But if you want to go and read the people that made your favorite stories come to life, that's where you go to TERRIFICON.
Well, I was with 2 people in Miami this weekend who are invited guests to your show, and they're very excited about going. I don't know if you announced them yet, but they're very excited. And they're going to be huge guests for you.
You've announced them too, which is
you did announce them.
Oh, Jimmy and Amanda.
Yes, yeah. Okay, good. I didn't know if you announced them.
No, they were one of the first ones to be announced.
Yes,
Yeah.
Jimmy and Amanda are very excited about going. We told them, Debbie and I told them just glowing things about you. And one thing that Jimmy was saying, what he loves, is that
There's a
you
Chick-fil-A.
are the sole promoter for this show. You are on every day. You are on every week.
And
You
so-
promote this massive, one of the top 5-10 conventions in the country.
Thank you.
Like you're running it out of where was the one, Turnbill? What was the one you had? Out of the small Holiday Inn hotel.
Oh, the Marriott. Yeah. When we were at the little one-day shows at the Marriott.
Yeah, what town was that?
Trumbull. That's where I live.
Trumbull. Yes, you still run it like you still promote it like it's Trumbull. That passion you have,
Yeah.
and it's
Thanks.
a really terrific show. Everybody, you guys got to go. It's Connecticut. It's what is it? Give us the dates, please.
It's August 14th to the 16th at Mohegan Sun Expo Center. Tickets are on sale now.
Yep, and that's Jimmy Palmiotti's birthday.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know
14th
that.
is his birthday. On the 13th, he's the
Oh,
14th.
Are we taking out the dinner?
Santana is going to be performing at the Mohegan Arena that night. I booked them just for Jimmy.
Nice.
He's going to happy birthday to him. He doesn't know that. No, but you know why? I'll tell you, just as you do your books, we all know who's going to work harder than you.
Right?
No, right?
Nobody.
You want something to sell? You better get out there and pound that pavement. Forget. It's nice to have these helpers, a street team, and all that, but you know what? That's my name above the thing, and I got bills to pay. And like I said, Jerry knows it too. He's like, "Why don't you trust people?" I'm like, trust people? No. I like being up at 4 a.m, typing things like Connecticut GamerCon because I can't proofread.
Right.
You know.
You get on the phone and you talk like Billy Tucci.
No, you know what? I got to tell you, God's honest truth. I've worked for art directors. I've worked for creative directors. I've done it myself. It is nothing better than being your own boss. I swear, this is the best job. I say it all the time. The best job I ever had in my life. I love comics. I love movies. I love that. I love meeting all you guys when you come there. How bad is it that I'm standing in line to get Mike Grell's autograph, and he looks up at me. He's like, "Is everything okay, Mitch?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you need something?" I go, "Yeah, could you sign my Green Arrow book?" And he's like, "Don't you own the show?" I'm like, "Here's $2. Is it? Do I have to pay?" No. But
I just found myself a nice copy of John Sable.
oh, isn't that a great book?
I haven't read it yet. So I got it on eBay. But just
he was doing a crowdfunding book too for the cat book, which was a character that was in that. Yeah, Maggie the cat. Yeah. See, I love all this stuff. I love dealing with Howard Chaykin and reminding him how he yelled at me when I showed him my portfolio 20-something years ago, and he called me all types of names and stuff. It's you know, success is its greatest revenge. Let me just say, the nuns that ripped up my comic books in Catholic school, she took my Spider-Man 120 and ripped it to shreds.
Oh,
I got you back, Sister Mary Antoinette. I'll tell you.
there you go.
Yeah,
We had one question for you, Mitch, from TJ James, and he just says, Mitch, can we expect more Justice League voices?
there's only one left that I haven't gotten. That would be Carl Lumley, who played the Martian Manhunter. I'm trying, but I've got 6 out of 7. That's a pretty good batting average, you know.
Oh, it's fantastic.
But next week there's going to be some more voiceover people. If you're a fan of the Batman animated series, I'm just going to let you know there'll be some folks coming that haven't been to Connecticut ever or around here ever. So keep your eyes peeled.
Wonderful.
And then I even got some old school people, like from the old days, you know.
Oh,
I don't know. People write to me all day and say, "Can you get this person? Can you get that person?" I'm trying to get Nicholas Hammond up here. Remember him? Spider-Man from the 70s?
Yeah, I was actually just researching him.
I was just talking to him about 3 hours ago. He's in Australia.
Yeah.
The problem is getting him over here. It's a 26-hour flight, you know? So we'll see. Spider-Man's webs can only go so far, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, those ropes.
You know who else is coming? In about 5 hours when I get up, I'm putting Steve Rude's coming.
Nice.
Steve Rude, and he's going to be doing a painting demonstration at the show.
Oh, great.
Very cool.
Yeah, right? See, this is the stuff I nerd out on that. I'll be sitting there watching Steve Rude paint when I'm supposed to be running a convention. I'm like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I paid for this. This is my
He used to be in San Diego, and he would have the camera.
Yeah.
And he would just be at his art table with a screen.
Yeah. That's what we're going to do.
Cool.
Yeah. See? Oh, if I can somehow.
Get him a nice wig too, like a little afro thing, and you can do that whole
Bob Ross.
Veiny biceps, super veiny biceps.
I don't think I'll do that for Neil Adams though. I'll ask Neil if he'll put the
Bob. Yeah, good luck.
Just have Neil yell at people.
Yeah, I was going to say he'll just yell at people.
Marilyn, get over there! No. No, I have fun. Billy, you have fun every year. You got your 2 helpers, the twins. I mean, you can't beat you guys. You know?
Oh, my twin! Remember, my twins left me. Now they did. You know, one did Claremont and the other did Red Brown.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I split them up on you. It was my fault.
No, that's all right. I had Debbie, so people like seeing Debbie in my booth anyway than them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Coen Brothers, who I love, but
yeah, no, it's going to be
we had a great time. We're looking forward to it because it's my birthday weekend too. So.
I hope
you have me.
It's going to be like Mardi Gras there, you know? It's just going to be all out Sodom and Gomorrah.
Hawaiian shirts, cigars.
Cake for them. Come
on.
on.
They got the cigar bar. They have that there at the Mohegan.
Yes, we went, right, Nile?
Yeah, hell yeah.
We went to the cigar bar last year, Nile and I. Yep, it was great. With the real-life Peter Griffin cosplayer who was there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he was up from Jersey. Yeah, that guy's great. Yeah.
Right. The show. That dude can ask, oh my God, he's a freaking voice box.
Yeah, he can
impersonate a hell of a lot of shit.
He does Sergeant Slaughter too.
Yeah,
fantastic impression.
And he can do like the whole Looney Tunes lineup.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he just did like Peter Griffin and Sergeant Slaughter.
If you're ever bored or anything, just put our episode on with him on it, and he's like a machine. He just doesn't stop.
Yeah, he's great,
unbelievable, and it's good. It's good.
He's going to be debuting a new character for the TERRIFICON family. We've already had Captain Terrificon, Terrificani, their Wonder Dog, and then this year Who's coming? Uncle Terrificon?
Uncle Mitch.
Uncle Mitch.
They're all based on me at various points in my life.
It was the dog too.
TJ says that means another bottle of scotch, Billy.
Yes.
No.
Scotch Con's moving to Terrificon.
Tally
No.
ho.
You know why Terrificon's great? Because it could be 3 a.m, where it was Michael Cho, you, Mike McCone,
Donnie.
they're all in the lobby at the hotel, a little half in the bag, arguing about stuff.
Yeah,
Nick,
me and Donnie got in a big argument.
yeah, right. It was great.
Yeah.
How about Baltimore? Remember Baltimore? You were outside with a cigar. It was you, Capullo, Snyder. They all have like the dead end kids outside causing trouble out there. You
The
know,
ones that nobody want, like the bad kids we were.
you don't get that in New York. You don't get that. You got to get that in a small little show like this. You know, so,
No, it's a wonderful show.
it's a
Hey,
terrific.
it sounds like a hell of a good time. Liquor Jim, it was. If you're there, you got to join us. Then you get in arguments with Donnie like me, screaming at each other.
Donnie, Case, and you were screaming at each other.
Yeah, but it's fine. We love each other, but it's like, yeah, shut the fuck up. That's not true. You know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, you don't know. Yeah, it was fun. It was
You
a lot
can swear
of fun.
on it,
Kids, comics.
Yeah, you can swear.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah, you
fuck!
can swear on
I've
this
been
show.
holding back for 2 hours now. For God's sakes, let me just say this. We got
It was
Frank.
great. It was great.
Listen to this lineup: Frank Thierry,
Yeah.
Jimmy Palmiotti, you. It's going to be like the Goodfellas. No, like Sopranos. Out in the
Well,
middle
we
of
gotta have a panel. I'd love to do. Nile and I would love to do another crowdfunding comics panel because that was really successful. But we
Yeah.
got to do a panel about New York City and the comics and New York or something, or listen to Jimmy panel.
Yeah.
And it'll all go downhill from there.
You can only be on the panel if your last name ends in a vowel. Is that what it is? All you can hear is, oh,
Hey, yo,
yeah.
Mine is a Y, but sometimes Y, right?
Yeah, why did you come up with? Yeah.
IOU.
You'll be like the Robert Duvall guy in The Godfather. It's like, who's that guy? He's a consigliere. We don't talk about that. You know?
Yeah, we don't. Yeah.
He's adopted. He's not part of it. Get Romita Jr. for that. I want to see all you there.
There you go. All right, I will. I will talk to you about. I'll talk to you this week or over the weekend, and I'll message John.
All right.
I promise.
All right.
He's trying to sell his house, so he might be moving to
I
San Diego.
know. It's been selling for a couple of years, trying to.
Yeah, he has. Yep.
Yeah.
But I will definitely text him. I promise.
Yeah.
Make it happen. Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Rockets
That's why
here.
your team
He'd
says
love it. He'd have the best time. I have your Rocketeer.
you don't want it. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's a
You don't
rough.
want it. I keep making them redo it.
Yeah, now it keeps making me do it. I got
Like
the
that.
rough right here. Hang on, I'll show you.
Horrible.
Here's the rough, Mitch. And then he's like, it sucks.
I'll trade you my Captain America game from the 60s. Oh, that's the rough.
That's the rough. So I gotta then put it on the light box, and Niles like it sucks. He's not gonna like it.
It looks good.
Really?
So there's the rough. I gotta put it on my artboard. One of my artboards here, you know. Light box it, ink it,
Who's the little guy?
and now who's that? Is that your great
That was
great
me
grandpa?
before I became old. Look at that.
I need to put some. I don't know. Holy hell. Show and tell.
If Debbie saw this when you were, she would have never married you, Billy.
That's true.
Is that your
Oh, you're
wood?
like at me too.
Yeah.
Mitch,
What are we
you
gonna
see what I have? Real quick.
We're at the front portion of our show.
Yeah. And this is my tape measure that I measured.
Show you what I got.
Ah. Oh, that's something. Ow! I'm sitting on my wife's
Yeah,
Peloton
Mitch.
bike. What? Oh boy, where'd you get that?
Oh yeah.
San Diego Comic-Con 1994.
Look at that.
It's
Signed by
the
Dave.
last
What is that?
the last unmolded helmet from the film.
Really?
Yep.
How'd you get that?
I bought it for like $200-300 in '94.
What is that? Cardboard?
There's a card. No, there's a wooden fin. It's press board, and this is resin.
Oh, jeez.
That's from the film.
Pretty cool.
That's cool.
So I've never painted it because I'm like, why would I paint it?
Well, why don't you make a mold out of it?
Stephon Roux said he wants me to mail it to
Someone
him.
wants to do that, yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going to mail that. But he said he'll make a mold of it and then paint one for me.
All right. This is how late it is. This is why we don't do well on a podcast, because Jerry and I bring our toys to it and no one ever can see that we're playing with Silver Cat.
All right, fellas.
Yeah.
Jerry, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on,
We
Jerry.
really appreciate it. We really do. Mitch, you too, buddy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming on.
Jerry. It's great to see you, Mitch. What the fuck?
I'm getting to you.
Yeah.
Hey,
Jerry,
everybody,
don't talk. You don't give him a chance to
my
talk.
comic coming out.
Oh, yeah. Jerry's got
Yes,
Marvel
tell us.
coming out in March.
a book coming out.
Submariner, part of Marvel's. It's like a Marvel snapshot #1 with Submariner, written by. Oh, my brain just went.
Kurt Busiek.
No, Kurt's like the curator of it.
Oh, I thought he wrote it.
No. Why? I apologize to the writer. My brain just went. Is
it a one shot?
It's a 30-page story of Submariner set in 1945 at the Palisades amusement park. It's all set at the Palisades amusement park, so it's kind of fun. It's got the all-winter squad. It's a cool story.
The Wizard's in it.
Really? The Wizard's in it? I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
the Wizard.
Who doesn't love a Wizard?
I love Wizard. Anyways, and then just so everyone knows, next week, this is our last show of the week. So next week, Tuesday, we have a Soar Song on the show. And then Thursday, we'll be speaking with Larry Hama.
Yes.
Cool.
Ooh.
Yes.
That's going to be a fun one.
That'll be a fun one. Looking forward to
We
it.
got lots of questions for Larry.
Lots of
He was
questions.
on MASH,
What?
He was on
Yes,
that.
we do know he was on. Yes, he was on.
And Saturday Night Live.
I think he asked us not to mention MASH, not to talk
Oh,
about
all
MASH.
right. And Jerry got stories
And
of
the
him.
war.
Jerry's got stories of him swinging a samurai blade and cutting Pat Broderick's hair off or something.
Yeah, it was from continuity. I worked with Pat. Pat was in a studio with me for a little bit in the mid '80s, and he said that he was at continuity at late hours. Neil would come in, and they'd say, "Hey, anybody want to do this?" And they would all work overnight because it would be commercial artwork or something. They'd make money. And Pat said he was drawing, he had his head down, drawing, and the place is pretty empty. And he starts feeling like air, like in a whoosh sound and stuff. And he looked, and Larry was like doing his sword thing, and so a couple of hairs fall onto the paper, and it's like, whoa. I asked Larry about it. Larry denied it, so it probably means it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just one more super chat we didn't get to. Apex Comics says, I'm putting out black and white magazines and
I
stores.
saw that. Yeah.
I don't know. What's your magazine?
What-
What's your
what did it
magazine, Apex Comics? What do you got? If they're still in the chat.
Say it again, Nile. What is it?
He said, let me see, because I got to see. Sometimes when the chats cycle, I can't post it up.
He said he's got black and white comics coming out when we were talking about black and white magazines. There he
Oh,
is.
cool.
There he is.
Yeah, but I don't know what the titles are.
Yeah.
Could be Xerox copies. We don't know.
So put that in a $500 super chat for what the title is.
$2. Maybe that's what it's called. Apex Comics, $2. That's it.
Yeah, asking us to read our super chats. Sorry. We got to read our super chats. We're new with the whole super chats thing.
Yeah. Crowdfunding Comics, please read your super
We can
chat.
carry that over to next week too, Nile.
Yeah.
We'll
So,
carry it over to our Tuesday show.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm getting some messages from Beyond the Grave. It's Jack Kirby. He wants to talk to you, Billy. What's that, Jack?
Ha ha.
You need to start smoking a cigar. Oh, there it is. Pyre
Pyre and Fembat.
Fembat.
Very cool. So keep us in the loop with that, Apex. If you get
Yeah.
some, promos, anything, any media you can send over, let us know. We'll help us spread the word on your magazine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Mitch, I'm sure I'll have something to harass you about through the messenger in the future.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
You guys
Jerry,
are great.
thank you.
Thank you so much. You really are.
Go to TerRIFICON and go to Connecticut GamerCon. I got 2 kids in college and I need to pay this tuition.
Connecticut GamerCon is went. Boom. There you go.
Connecticut GamerCon, March 21st to the 22nd.
And then we got TerRIFICON
Bam.
August 14th to the 16th, 2020. And then, as always, you can hear Jerry and I on the Power Cosmic podcast on a podcast near you for free. Every week or so when we get together for pizza.
I've never slept better, so you guys really should subscribe.
You should. Thank you, Nile. Thank you.
Thank you, Mob C.
It was great.
Everyone have a great day. This was a great show. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Everyone will see you next Tuesday.
See you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning into Crowdfunding Comics. We look forward to hanging out with all of our crowdfunding fans every time we go live. And don't forget to click the link below and subscribe to our channel. And there's a little bell. You may want to hit that too. This way you get all the great notifications when we go live and when we upload some awesome content. You want to follow us? Sure, go right ahead at Twitter at CrowdFundComics with an X, Instagram Crowdfunding Comics, and Facebook at Crowdfunding Comics. Till next time, crowdfunding fans, we'll see you soon.